morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on YouTube and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're all about the Jets and the Oilers, the regular season for the Jets having concluded last night. The Oilers have one final regular season game this afternoon for reasons that I cannot be explained by anyone with any sense of logic. But that being said, we know these two teams are going to start the first round of the North Division playoffs next Wednesday. So it's time to delve deep, comprehensive preview of the Jets and the Oilers. With Dave Minuk, with Ezra Ginsburg, I am your host, Drew Mandel. We welcome everybody to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. So nice to see so many of you on this Saturday morning. Some familiar faces, some new faces. So many thanks to all of you for joining us. Gentlemen, it has been a whopping 11 hours since we've last seen each other. However,
Missed you boys.
You missed us? I know, Dave. It's been a tough 11 hours. How have you guys been spending your time? A lot of quality time, I assume. You know, doing some reading, some analysis, things of that nature. Certainly not.
No,
not none of that.
About, Drew. Some of us may have been up till 1:30 in the morning working on a little site called illegalcurve.com, trying to stay awake. I was like, okay, I was exhausted. I don't know why. I was just tired yesterday. I was trying to get the site up. I finished all the post-game recap shortly after. Well, it was up while we were on, but then I finished it all off, got it all going. I thought, okay, well, now I got to get going on the morning papers. Got to have those ready to go at 7 o'clock. And I was falling asleep. And there was only one thing that kept me up at about 12:45. And I turned it on and I watched it. Although I had to watch 4 commercials in advance of actually getting to watch it. The O-Dog race.
Oh, it was amazing.
I have to say, like, I actually watched, or not, I guess it was like a time race, and I busted out laughing, and it totally woke me up, and I was able to finish all my work. But it was what's the other guy's name?
O-Dog against Al's brother on.
And let me tell you,
the Overdrive.
Watching those guys run was hilarious. So it woke me up, got me going, allowed me to get all the rest of the papers, which are up on illegalcurve.com.
I thought you were going to say you stayed up finishing that bottle of Fireball that you were chugging back last night. We saw courtesy of our good friends at Seagram's, new sponsor here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show and illegalcurve.com. Ezzy, did you catch the O-Dog versus Al's brother race? I can sort of see you maybe being a third in that. You know, looks like a lot of guys with some knee troubles, which you have. Of course, your ACL still not rehabbed, going on, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 25 years of that, and get a little bit of the paunch on there as well. So I thought that would be a good Dave. Let's call a spade a spade. I mean, I'm not one to throw I live in a glass house and throw some stones just the same. But it was a very funny race.
No, I didn't see the race. I'll have to check it out, but I'm sure it's entertaining. O-Dog, good friend of the program. He was on the show last week. Yeah, didn't know there was a race. I was so focused on that Jets-Leafs game last night. Obviously, I've been living under a rock, so I'll check her out on YouTube after the show, or maybe during the show.
Or maybe just right now. We'll just peace out for a while, come back to watch it, and take it.
You looking as he's got like kind of a glazed over look because you can tell he's absolutely not paying attention.
I'll just make sure I'm muted, boys.
That's right. Exactly. That's all we appreciate. Anyways, gentlemen, let's get started. Obviously, we're going to talk in depth today about the Jets and the Oilers. And these are two teams that are definitely familiar with each other because it has been, 9 games that they've played against each other this year. And it has not been close over the course of those 9 games. The Oilers, we know, dominant against the Winnipeg Jets, putting together that record of 7 wins and 2 losses, all of them, if I'm not mistaken, in regulation time. The Oilers outscoring the Jets 34-22 in those 9 games, and it's been the Connor McDavid show in those 9 games as well. 16 points Connor McDavid has scored in those 9 games against the Jets. He's basically been the one-man wrecking crew. Let me ask you, this has been the topic du jour really since it became apparent that the Jets and the Oilers were destined to match up in the first round. What's it going to take for the Winnipeg Jets to slow down, to neutralize, to combat Connor McDavid so that he doesn't single-handedly win the series?
Yeah, and you just mentioned it, Drew, like it's neutralized. It's not stopping because you're not going to stop Connor McDavid. Like, find me one team in the NHL that stopped Connor McDavid this year. Obviously, McDavid was only playing teams in the Canadian division, but in years past, I mean, he was tearing up all the other teams, right? So I think it starts with, staying out of the penalty box and minimizing his damage on the power play, because, you talked about, how successful the Oilers were against the Jets. A lot of the damage that McDavid was doing was on the power play. He obviously was scoring at even strength as well. And that's why, McDavid is so dangerous, because he can hurt you in a variety of ways. But I think, at times in the season series, the Jets were maybe taking uncharacteristic penalties. So I would say that is the first thing. And I also think, you have to be physical with McDavid, guys. Like, obviously, you have to catch him, right? Like, he's one of the fastest guys in the league, but we know that, teams that have had success against Edmonton, Montreal is one of those teams. And that's why, I think Montreal was hoping, earlier in the season, when they were still kind of in consideration for that second or third playoff spot, they might match up against the Oilers. But I think that's part of it is, you have to kind of do whatever you can do to slow him down. And that's obviously easier said than done. But that's something that is absolutely crucial. And, you saw the Mark Scheifele line up against Connor McDavid, and the results were not good. We talked about it on last night's postgame show. Travis Yost wrote about it for TSN.ca. There were only a couple of players. Dave mentioned Mason Appleton was one of them. I'm not sure, what line Mason Appleton was on. It might have been with Kopp and Lowry when he was going up against Connor McDavid. But, I would expect that it would be Pierre-Luc Dubois' line. So if that's Dubois, Stastny, and Kopp, or, if Ehlers comes back and that's Dubois, Stastny, and Ehlers, I would expect Paul Maurice wants to get that line up against the Connor McDavid line, or you're trying to get the Adam Lowry line. But there always is the chance that you're going to see top line versus top line guys.
Well, let's stop right
now. And I was just going to quickly say, right now, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are split up 1-2 down the middle. They've had Draisaitl up on that line. Jesse Puljujarvi's kind of been the staple of that first line all year. It's Dominic Cahoon who's up there right now with McDavid. But regardless, guys, of who's on Connor McDavid's line, if Draisaitl happens to be on McDavid's line, you have to worry about him. If he's the second line center, you also have to worry about him. So, there's that, but there's also the fact that the Jets have to score more goals against the Oilers. Like, it was clear. And obviously, Mike Smith is a good goalie and everything like that, but Smith isn't a goalie that, you're thinking is going to limit you to 1 or 2 goals every game. And that's really what he was doing all year long. So the Jets are going to have balanced scoring. When the Jets were on the really good run and winning all of those games on the road, it was because of balanced scoring. You were getting contributions from Andrew Kopp. You were getting contributions from Mason Appleton. You were getting, the odd goal from Trevor Lewis. You were getting the odd goal, from Pierre-Luc Dubois. Dubois is the one guy. He's probably my X factor, boys. But back to what you were asking, Drew, about McDavid. The only thing you can do is try to limit his time and space and limit the damage that he does, and try to stay out of the penalty box and not let him have those odd man opportunities on the power play.
To Ezzy's point there, Dave, I mean, he mentioned, that, it could be a best on best matchup, match the Scheifele, Connor, Wheeler line against McDavid and Puljujarvi and right now Dominic.
God have mercy on the Jets' soul if they do that.
Well, that was my question. I mean, that's the approach that Paul Maurice took throughout the majority of the regular season, and it failed spectacularly, as the numbers bear out. So is there any chance that the Jets head coach, do you think that he thinks that that's still a plausible matchup for the Jets? Because despite all evidence to the contrary, I mean, you go back, you watch the video, you watch everything about it. Not only did they fail to neutralize or to slow down Connor McDavid, it also prevented them from doing anything on the offensive side of the game, which is certainly an area where the Jets will need their contribution. So under any circumstances, can you foresee how that should be the matchup that the Jets would deploy against McDavid?
I can see it. If you want to not have success, then yes, I would see that as a path forward.
Self-sabotage would be the only way.
Well, guys, we know if it hasn't worked, what you have to look at what has worked, like what your season. Again, we're not looking at one game. I mean, that's the beauty of this season. You've got 9 or 10 games against another team. Well, that's a decent enough sample size to be able to draw some reasonable conclusions. And one of the reasonable conclusions I think we're able to draw from what we've seen between the head-to-head matchups between those lines is it doesn't work well for the Jets. Now, I suspect one head coach is going to be trying to get that, and his name is Dave Tippett. And I think that, and he's an excellent coach, and he's a master tactician. So you got to be a little careful if you're Paul Maurice in terms of that. And maybe that means you don't play those guys together. That's also a possibility. There's been a lot of talk from Paul Maurice in terms of, Pierre-Luc Dubois on the right and moving guys around. So I don't know. I'm a little curious to know. He knows that this line is going, in terms of he got these guys going, got them going offensively. They feel good about their game. Is he going to keep them together? Will he keep them together for the whole series? I don't know. I'm honestly not entirely certain. I'm wondering if Paul Maurice is attempting to, maybe play a little gamesmanship before and saying, okay, well, people think that that's what he's going to rely on, and he may go away from it. And if he doesn't, he doesn't, because it's Old Faithful to him. But again, Drew, there's no great revelation there. The numbers bear out that the Scheifele line up against the McDavid line is a feast for Connor McDavid. So you're not going to do it because it hasn't been successful. What would make it successful now? Because nothing. What's nothing? Because it's nothing's different. The hockey is still the same. I know that it quote ramps up in the playoffs, and maybe I don't know what you would suddenly be doing differently that you weren't doing in the regular season. Because again, you're not defending differently. You might be trying to play a little bit of a tighter game and less loose offensively. But Scheifele, Connor, Wheeler has a dedication to defense. But Connor's been a little bit better. But again, that's not exactly a line that's adherence is to defense first, then to offense. So again, when you're playing Connor McDavid, we looked at the article from Travis Yost yesterday, and it showed who are the guys, right? We talked about it: Nikolai Ehlers, Mason Appleton, Matthew Perreault, and Adam Lowry. So if you're Paul Maurice, you're trying to create some sort of combination that can go up against Connor McDavid. Again, Leon Draisaitl, I'm not taking anything away from him. He's a fantastic hockey player, but there was always a way to defend against Messier. Gretzky was always a different story. So if you can try and neutralize Gretzky, you'll be able to. You can again. The Jets have the depth to go up against Draisaitl, but if you can neutralize Connor McDavid, that's what I think they need to do.
Yeah, and we're talking a lot about the forward combinations, and rightly so, right? Because the Jets have struggled to score goals, and the Jets haven't had that mix that they had earlier in the season, right? Let's be honest, when Nikolai Ehlers went down, that's a huge blow, and it kind of makes all the other lines have a gap except for the top line. That's why you saw Connor Scheifele and Wheeler reunited, because you knew that they couldn't depend on whether that's Pierre-Luc Dubois or Paul Stastny offensively. Those guys in the second half of the season, they've struggled offensively, and it's going to be really interesting to see, guys, what D pair Paul Maurice would like to have up against the McDavid line, right? Mm-hmm. Because oftentimes you'll have Josh Morrissey and whoever he's paired up with Dylan DeMello right now. For the majority of the season, it was Tucker Poolman, and we know what those results are, right? So I would absolutely, if I'm Paul Maurice, want the Morrissey DeMello pair out there. So does that mean that you're going to see, that pair out with the Dubois line or the Lowry line, and then the Forbort Pionk you would see with the Scheifele line? That's something to look for. But I think it goes back to what we were talking about before, with McDavid and just how dominant he is. The Jets are going to have to play really well as a 5-man unit is what I'm talking about here. We can talk about, the lack of, great defensive forwards on the Jets here, but we know from watching this team so many times this year and how much damage not only Connor McDavid has done, but the Oilers as a team have done to the Jets. You're going to have to be really smart and not turn the puck over, because that's what this Oilers team does really well. And their defense, I've said this many times before, said this last night. It's a very offensive minded group, right? Tyson Barrie led all defensemen in scoring. Darnell Nurse, I don't know if he was top 10, but he was close to top 10 in. He was
Darnell Nurse was having had the best season for an Oilers defenseman. God, probably in 20 years.
Absolutely,
I can't think of another one in the last 20 years.
And he's a great defenseman, right? He was taken in the Josh Morrissey year, and he's always been a good defenseman. But you're right, Drew. He has definitely taken off in this shortened season, and that's what the Oilers like to do. They like to counterpunch. They like to create turnovers. Before and again, this is something that has applied all season long for the Jets. But the Jets are absolutely a team that needs to have their rush game going, their speed game going. This is a team that obviously can get the odd dirty goal, but they're going to have to create more offensive chances off the rush. And that's something we didn't see enough during the Jets-Oilers series. So, yeah, we can talk all we want about, shutting down Connor McDavid, but you're going to have some balanced scoring here. And that's not just the Scheifele-Connor Wheeler line. I mean, Pierre-Luc Dubois, I said it before, I think, he's going to be a key to this series. If he doesn't produce offensively, I think it's really going to be tough for the Jets to win the series.
Yeah, I mean, that's, the Jets, I guess the advantage, or I guess for lack of a better term, is that they know rock bottom against this Oilers team. That, series at home, those 3 games at home where the Oilers absolutely embarrassed them top to bottom. That was, the Jets saying, okay, look, everything we've done against this Oilers team, whatever our strategy has been to deploy against this Oilers team, has not worked. So you probably do have to go back to the drawing board when it comes to defending against the Oilers, which is almost a bit of an advantage for the Jets in the sense that the Oilers probably don't know what the Jets are going to throw at them. The Jets know what the Oilers are going to deploy at them because, you're not going to change up very much when you're that dominant and when it's McDavid doing what he's been doing with Puljujarvi all season long. And then, after, what the Oilers like to do is when they have an opportunity at different points in time during the game, they'll throw out McDavid and Draisaitl together almost as a double shift when they wouldn't be expected. Maybe after a penalty kill, they'll give them a shift together to try and sort of juice the team a little bit. So the Jets are what I'm going to suspect, because the Jets can't just continue doing what they've been doing, definition of insanity and all that. But the Jets approach is going to be almost unknown to the Oilers, whereas the Oilers approach is going to be known to the Jets simply because of the 9 games previous this season, Dave.
Well, you hope. I mean, realistically, Drew, again,
it's coaching malpractice if you just continue to do what you tried to do for 9 games and have it fail immensely.
Well, I mean, again, we don't. It's funny because Josh Morrissey was asked about this the other day in terms of, I think it was Carter Brooks from Game On asked him about, what were you able to do in the first 3 games where you had more success against the Oilers, winning 2 of 3, and Josh was like, well, it feels like, even though it's a condensed schedule, that feels like a lifetime ago, because of course their muscle memory is 6 straight losses to the Oilers, and to your point, those 3 at home. During that homestand between the Oilers and the Leafs, which was seen as so critical by so many, really was just a catalyst to, a terrible losing streak, the worst one we've seen, right, in some time. So, I mean, again, Drew, I think you're 100% right. I don't think you can try the same thing, right? Like, you want Tucker Pullman on that first pairing? I mean, he's injured right now, right? So he was in a non-contact, I believe, yesterday at skate. But again, like I said, I like Tucker Pullman. I'm not maligning Tucker Pullman, but Tucker Pullman is a 3rd pairing guy. If you have a guy, and again, I know salary shouldn't dictate where your guys play, but how many first pairing guys are making $750,000 or whatever Tucker's making? Again, so it's just a reality that it just doesn't happen very often. And you're putting a guy in a position that he's just not suited for. Tucker Pullman is suited to be your 3rd pairing right side defenseman. That's fine. He's capable of doing that.
Well, and especially, I was going to say, Dave, in the playoffs when you're going up against one of the best offensive teams in the league, and the team that you've struggled against, right?
That's right.
So that even further illustrates your point, right? And I mean, I think we would all expect Morrissey and DeMello to play together. We obviously don't know that. Maurice hasn't confirmed that, but I think if you consider that they've played together, towards the end of the season. And I think the only pair that you can say with certainty is going to be together is Forbort and Pionk, right? The Duluth connection. And then Logan Stanley, guys, I think has earned himself a spot on that 3rd pair on the left side. I mean, Jordy Ben is maybe the only other option there, because I think at this point, Ville Heinola is not an option. Yeah, so I think your 3rd pair is probably going to be Stanley and Pullman.
Well, depending. I mean, right now, I think that actually in Paul Maurice's mind, I wouldn't be surprised if Ben on the right side is ahead of Pullman depth chart wise. Now,
possible.
The difference between Ben on the right side and Pullman on the right side probably isn't any great significance.
About 475 NHL games.
That's about the difference, and we know Paul Maurice will defer to Jordy Ben in this case because he's a veteran. Now that doesn't bother me because, again, Tucker Pullman, like you said, Dave, 3rd pairing is the best role for him, and if it means that he's out of the lineup, I don't think that there's a ton there that that's not going to be that the Jets need that Jordy Ben also can't contribute. that being said, it does seem like Logan Stanley on that third pairing left side has affirmed himself, at least in my mind, as being the option for game one of the series against the Oilers. He's looked, relatively decent. I think he does bring that physical edge, and that the size factor I do think is what is a appealing factor for the Jets. As much as I would have liked to see Ville Heinola, and I don't think I think it's possible we'll see him at some point during the series if the Jets struggle, especially if the back end struggles. It does seem to me that Heinola is probably your fourth option on the left side to start this series, and you're going to go Morrissey, Forbort, and Stanley to start for the Jets on the left side. But again, it's going to take that 5-man unit that you spoke about, Ezzy, in order to really neutralize or to mitigate Connor McDavid, because you can't expect the deep pairing to do it itself, and you can't expect the forward group to do it itself. He's just too good. He can dominate on his own.
And I think, Drew, that's the nail on the head. I think it's a function of you just have to be aware defensively. I mean, and it's not just, okay, well, the defense has them. I mean, when Connor McDavid is on the ice, you have to be aware. And again, you have to shut him down. And again, a lot of the comments in the chat right now are, well, easier said than done. Well, obviously, I 100% agree. The guy has 104 points in the season, 105, 106, whatever it was. It was 104.
David's year, Dave, was one of those years that is going to be looked at in the history books as one of those exceptional years. 104 points in an 82 game season is exceptional. he did it in 56 games. Like, same thing with Austin Matthews in his 41 goals. 41 goals in 53 games or 54 games, because I think he missed a couple games. Like, that's ridiculous. Yeah. That's a 60 goal pace, right?
Yeah, those are numbers that are otherworldly, especially in a shortened season. You're right, Tezzy.
Yeah. So anyway, I just think it's a function of, to Ezzy's point, you just aren't going to be able. You just have to limit the damage, and that's really what you're doing. And again, like I said, you have to look at the numbers and who has been able to successfully do that. And I don't want to harp on the advanced stats or any of that stuff, but the reality is, again, the numbers have not borne out to suggest that you want to match top best against best. So like I said, the Travis Yost article I thought was interesting. It was illuminating. It showed you which guys have had success against Connor McDavid on this Jets team. And again, like I said, so if you're Paul Maurice, it's not as if these guys don't have access to this, right? It's not like Travis Yost has some secret database that isn't available to everybody else. So again, assuming Andrew Kopp is healthy, Mason Appleton, again, Matthew Perreault, Adam Lowry, Nikolai Ehlers, those are the guys that you really want as your forward group, and you're not going to get last change. So it's not always going to be in your favor, which means it's incumbent on Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, Blake Wheeler, the Pierre-Luc Dubois, all those other guys. And as he's right, I also think Pierre-Luc Dubois is going to be his defense. We'll see what he's capable of bringing. And
no points in his last 10 games, right? Again, I'm not trying to single him out here.
But if he does what he did in the bubble last year to Toronto, he's going to remember the fact that he struggled in his first season or first part of a season here in Winnipeg. This is the time for they sort of the reputation that Pierre-Luc Dubois has is that he's sort of a big game player, that he gets more hyped for when the spotlight is at its brightest. So if we're seeing that come this playoff series, if he takes on the challenge, and I don't know if he's going to get McDavid, but let's say he takes on, if he doesn't get McDavid, he's likely to get Draisaitl. So if he's able to take on that challenge and he's able to win that battle, or at least play him to a draw, then the Jets are perfectly fine with that. Look, if Lowry, Kopp, and Appleton, and let's assume that for the sake of this conversation, let's assume everybody's healthy, and that's obviously a big question mark, especially with Nikolai Ehlers. Paul Maurice did say that, after last night's game, that Pierre-Luc Dubois and that Paul Stastny would be in the lineup for game one of the playoffs against the Oilers. They might not practice tomorrow per se, but they will practice before the series begins, and they'll be in the lineup. So let's assume everybody's healthy. If that means that Lowry, Kopp, and Appleton get the McDavid line, and then Dubois, Ehlers, and Dubois, Ehlers, and Stastny get the Draisaitl line. Well, guess what? That should be an opportunity for the Scheifele, Connor, Wheeler line to feast, because that's the advantage the Jets have on the Oilers, is that they have the depth that the Oilers don't have. I mean, you look at the bottom six of the Oilers, and Dave Tippett has done a nice job with these guys, but for the most part, they're not household names. They're not look, the Jets' top line should be able to dominate them because there's a clear skill advantage on the Jets side. If you look at the ledger, the Jets have the advantage there, and that's why I think if you're Paul Maurice, you're trying to keep Scheifele, Connor, and Wheeler away from the Oilers' big guys so that they can have the opportunity to really take over against the bottom six of the Edmonton Oilers.
Right. And Dave mentioned, in Edmonton, you're not going to have the last change. So in the first couple of games, you might not get that matchup as much as you want. But yeah, there's no doubt, Drew, I think in most of our minds here that, the Jets' top 12 forwards are better than the Oilers' top 12 forwards. It so happens that the Oilers have the two best forwards, of the two teams. So that maybe, equals it out a little bit, but you're absolutely right. That's the type of matchup you're trying to get. And, I wouldn't be surprised if you see Draisaitl and McDavid split up at times. I wouldn't be surprised if you have them together at times, especially, we're going to see them together in the first power play unit. And that first power play unit is kind of similar to the Jets in that they stay out a little bit longer than maybe some other power play units. But, I think Rob Somerville made a good point here, in the chat talking about, pressure. And that's something, guys, that, we've talked a little bit about this year. And I think you saw that towards the end of the year in the Jets' last two victories. Like, the Jets have to put the pressure on Edmonton, not just physically, not just a forecheck, but offensively. Like, they need to play in the Oilers zone. And that's something, it was painful to watch. Like, when you talk about 7 losses in 9 games, like that's not just losing the season series. You were dominated. And I think there were times in those games where the Jets just couldn't put together, 2 or 3 consecutive good shifts. I'm not saying that, they were the worst team in all of those losses, but they're definitely going to have to put some pressure on Mike Smith, because at times in the season series, like Smith, it was just too easy for him. And Smith is a great goalie. And Dave has talked about this before. You got to keep the puck away from him. He can play the puck. He's like a third defenseman back there. That's another thing the Jets are going to have to do successfully. They're going to have to keep it away from him. They're going to have to, be better in their zone entries at times, especially if Nikolai Ehlers isn't there, because we know he's the zone entry guru. And, this is, I think, an opportunity here for the Jets to steal a game. And at the end of the day, the season series doesn't mean much. If the Jets score early, they win that first game, the outlook is going to change completely. And now the Jets aren't an underdog. They're in the driver's seat. So even though the Jets, I think, are the underdog on paper and a lot of people are predicting the Oilers to win, welcome Jeff Hamilton to the show. I still think, the Jets have, just as good a shot to win the series as they did last year against Calgary.
And with that, Ezzy, we are pleased to welcome to the program from the Winnipeg Free Press, our good friend Jeff Hamilton joins us on the show right now, talking more about the Winnipeg Jets Edmonton Oilers first round playoff matchup. Jeffrey, good to see you this morning. How are things?
Great, gentlemen. Excited to be on. Thanks for having me. I've been listening to the chat. It's been great. Got a lot of comments about some of the stuff you said. Agree with a lot of it. So, pleasure to be on.
Our pleasure to have you. So, Jeff, let's sort of get your opinion on this. Obviously, we know that the key for the Winnipeg Jets is if not shutting down Connor McDavid altogether, but it's at least neutralizing him or not letting him take it over the series like he did in the 9-game regular season series. So you're putting on your coaching hat right now. What do you deploy? How do you deploy the Jets in order to try and mitigate that influence of Connor McDavid?
Well, isn't that the number one question here? I mean, how often do we hear players talk about other players in the context that they talk about Connor McDavid? Like, he's going to get his points. He's going to get his opportunity. Like, you don't hear that stuff about Austin Matthews. You don't hear that stuff about anybody else in the league. Yes, you see appreciation for certain players as media asks about certain guys, and they kind of give you that topical stuff. But from coaching staff to players right on down, it's like this guy's, a super freak or inhuman. And so obviously that's the number one question. And I mean, the answer, I don't know if I can, the Jets don't seem to have an answer. So why would Jeff Hamilton have an answer? But here's the thing about it is that this is like, you can't see this guy through a lens of being superhuman. It's a hockey game. He's one of 5 guys on the ice. And it's not like he's been particularly dangerous this year. There's no doubt about it. But I feel like this whole kind of not, down, like overplaying him, because you're not, but just maybe understanding a little bit that this guy is human, and that if you can stop him, that's going to be the key ingredient here. It's obviously going to be tough. There's certain things you can do, stay off the penalty kill, because you put that guy on the power play and he's going to kill you. The Oilers have 8 power play goals against the Jets this year, the most out of any team. And they got a great power play. You talk about Leon Draisaitl, you talk about Connor McDavid. Well, there's other pieces around that puzzle that are also pretty dangerous. And so, it's going to be the number one question. I ain't going to leave you here with an answer on how to stop Connor McDavid, but I sure as heck like talking about it for sure.
Yeah, Hammer, earlier in the show, I was just making up ways to shut down Connor McDavid. I mean, they were just all nonsense. You can't shut McDavid down. As you mentioned, he's a super freak. But, another thing we were talking about right before you came on was Pierre-Luc Dubois. And he's obviously had his offensive struggles. We all know that. But the question I wanted to ask you is, do you anticipate Paul Maurice using him on the wing or at center? Do you think that's going to change? Because that could be a huge factor here. In addition to the Jets shutting down McDavid and Connor Hellebuyck, hopefully stealing a couple games for the Jets, I mean, they have to get Pierre-Luc Dubois going. And I think we would all agree he probably has the best chance at succeeding if he's playing up the middle.
It's an interesting conversation. I kind of lean to what Drew said earlier, in the sense that this is an opportunity for Pierre-Luc Dubois. Like, if you're not happy with your season, like, you can flip the script here. No one's going to be talking about all your struggles, about how, whether it started in Columbus with wanting to get out of there and having a public trade, to getting here, to having a quarantine, to getting injured and playing catch up and all this stuff. Like, all that narrative can get flipped right away if you can put together some kind of series against the Oilers. And it doesn't need to be the series you had against the Maple Leafs in the past. You just need to be a solid player. And I feel like, I disagree, not necessarily if the word disagree is right, but I think he'd be better utilized on the wing for this playoffs. And the reason why I suggest that is because what is kind of painfully obvious to me, at least this year, is that he's struggled to adapt to his wingers. And that responsibility, I think, was a lot easier in Columbus because you were the man on the line. You carried lines with 2 wingers that needed to form their game around you. The unfortunate part here in Winnipeg is that because there's so much talent up front, because you slot into that top 6, the people on, flanking your wings are talented guys that have known their success and aren't necessarily going to adjust to a game that I'm not even 100% sure they know about Pierre-Luc Dubois. So to me, there's a little bit of an identity crisis here, and I'm not going to call it a lost opportunity, but I felt like because of the season Pierre-Luc Dubois has been having, and because a lot of the emphasis has been on his lack of production and points and not finding the back of the net as often, I thought maybe he could be a better fit to be defensive and maybe give him that responsibility of shutting down the Connor McDavids to have his confidence, joining like a Lowry line, putting Kopp up there, because Kopp's a guy who will add a defensive element to that top 6 line, whatever line he's on, and maybe take a little bit of the pressure off with Pierre-Luc Dubois and have a little bit of a role, if you will, because that's the thing with me right now, is that I don't know if we know what his role is on this team going into the playoffs. Like, is it to drive a line? Is it to complement a line? What is being asked of him? Whereas if you would have taken this last little bit, because they're trying to play this hard grinding game this last 7 or 8 games or whatever. And I felt like that's the kind of game that needs to improve with Pierre-Luc Dubois, because we saw it early on. We saw the guy's physicality. We saw him box out players on the boards. And over this last 7 to 10 games where the team hasn't looked great at all, that's the one thing missing with him, is he's not competing for the puck. He's not winning those puck battles that we saw. And so putting him on the wing with a line with, say, Andrew Kopp and Adam Lowry, or whoever, Mason Appleton, gives him that kind of distinct role where he doesn't need to carry a line. He just needs to play, sound defensively and take a little bit of that pressure off offensively and let it come, because we've seen Mason Appleton and Lowry generate offense, and I think he'd be a nice piece there. I think it's too late. And I think it's too late to go there, even if you're down a couple series in a game, because now it's just kind of confusing. So what exactly we're looking for him in the playoffs, I don't really know, but the point stands that this is a major opportunity for him to flip everything and all the negativity that we've seen, kind of tossed his way because of the high expectations, obviously following a trade with Patrick Laine.
Jeff Hamilton is our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Saturday morning, we're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms discussing the Jets and the Oilers. The first round playoff series gets underway Wednesday night. And of course, we'll have the post-game show coming for you Wednesday night, probably around 10:30, 10:40 p.m., depending on when the final buzzer sounds, Mr. Minuk.
That's true, Drew. Thank you. Jeff, one of the narratives I think that the team seems to be focusing on, we saw Blake Wheeler, and I believe you've been asking about it, is that us against the world mentality. And do you find Kyle Connor kind of, I don't want to say disputed it a little bit, but he had a little bit of a different narrative yesterday. But Blake Wheeler, I thought, encapsulated it, and that idea of it's us against the world. Nobody picked us. Do you think that's going to hold them in good stead, or do you think it really is just kind of, those are words and they still have to go out and play, on the ice and try and have success there?
Number one question, Dave, in my opinion, is that this has been the narrative here, and rightfully so. I mean, you lose 7 games in a row, people are counting you out. It doesn't matter if you're the Winnipeg Jets, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Edmonton Oilers. You put together that kind of miserable month, and of course, people are going to turn their backs on you. I mean, this isn't like this shouldn't be a tough pill to swallow, but I do see them manufacture it, and I liken it a little bit to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in the sense that, they were a good team all season last year for the most part, kind of tailed off near the end as they went through injuries. And then with the whole kind of, Andrew Harris getting snubbed for awards, carried this massive chip on their shoulders that no one believes in us. This is unbelievable. We're going to prove everybody wrong. And they went on the road and won 3 straight games, including a dominating display against the Hamilton Tiger Cats in the final. Now, a completely different game here and a completely different mindset amongst millionaire NHLers and guys grinding in the CFL, but that's what you're seeing here. And to me, if you you're right, Dave, Blake is, has kind of encapsulated all of that because he's that kind of player. He's that kind of leader. He's been counted out his entire career. And despite all the praise he's been getting, because I think he's a little out to lunch as far as the negativity that that he's been thrown his way. I think we were on the brink of that, and the whole injury, the rib injury thing that later came out, I thought that was kind of funny because everyone knew you were injured. You were playing like you were injured. You never went into the corners. You never threw a body check, and you were logging massive minutes. So all those questions were valid, and it's all of a sudden end of the season. I told you I'd come back. Well, sorry, Blake, but you came back and you lost 7 straight games. So you weren't on that road trip where the Jets were dominating. So I'm sorry if it's tough for that, a pill to swallow, but you get paid more than $8 million a season. So the expectations are high and fans are passionate. So to come and kind of have this chip. So anyways, back to the original point is that they are doing that. I mean, and there is people who are saying that, and Blake mentioned it post game, people are looking at the Canadian division kind of like a joke. They're kind of looking at it as this high scoring, not as talented. Even when you look at, I think the Oilers have been very impressive over the last couple of months, but, early on, I felt I think I was starting to buy into that. The Canadian division was a bit weaker. So all those things are true. And, you can have this mindset like us against the world, but you got to prove it. And to me, if you have that attitude, then you're wondering, you're wondering your integrity is being challenged, your character is being challenged. To me, and I asked this question of Paul Maurice, I said, at what point during this losing streak do things get personal? Right? When does it stop becoming about X's and O's and about this game and small steps forward and becomes personal when you lose puck battles, personal when you lose games where it doesn't matter what the X's and O's suggest. You're not letting a player beat you in a puck battle. And we just haven't seen that. So this whole chip on my shoulder narrative is great, but you better damn well play like that and prove us wrong, because there's not a single person in media or fans or whomever who have counted out the Jets or have said the Canadian division is not as strong, isn't willing to be proven wrong. And it's not going to be because you proved us wrong. It's because you found that ingredient inside you to actually give a damn and make it happen on the ice. So that's it.
Have a take, Jeff Hamilton. I love it.
Whoa.
Bring in the
Jeff,
Get Hamilton some of that fireball. Let's get some of that fireball over Jeff Hamilton.
Jeff needs the fire above his head because he was bringing the heat on that one. Woo.
Winston Churchill be damned. Put me in the middle of that room and provide some perspective. Let's go, guys. Jeez,
I love it, Jeff. Can the Jets win this series without Nikolai Ehlers?
like it'd be kind of ridiculous to say no because nothing's impossible. I mean, you obviously want him back. Realistically, it's going to be a tough challenge because I think what we realized this season, and I'm not saying it's set in stone, but it's become clear to me is that Nikolai Ehlers is the only game breaker on this team. He's the only guy who can individually do something and change a game without the help of his respective, line mates and whatnot. So we've seen it this year. We've seen the guy step over the blue line and, risk goals. We've seen him come up with big goals at big moments. So of course it's going to be a lot better situation for the Jets if he's in the lineup, but to suggest they couldn't win without him, I don't know. I just think it's going to have to be one of those, low scoring grinding games because I don't think you can't, the Jets have the offensive, firepower, even with the lack of game breakers, if you will. I mean, you have the firepower to score goals, but this argument of having to go, toe to toe with this team is not what you want because you don't have the defense to back up a toe to toe offensive game. That's just the fact of the matter. And it's not just bad defensive coverage. It's you don't have the transition, you don't have the puck moving. This is clearly your weakness. So you want to play that grinding game and you want to buy in to that hard game because you're going to have to turn this series, even if it isn't necessarily your identity, you're going to have to turn this series into a different style of game, one that you might not be best suited for, but it's going to be the best situation for you to come out of this out of this series victorious. And whether you have Nick Ehlers or not, I don't know if that necessarily changes that. Nick Ehlers just gives you a little bit more firepower up front and potential to turn that game in your favor that I don't think you otherwise get with him out of the lineup.
How much of a factor do you think, the series starting on the road is? Because we know that, the Jets have been better this year on the road as compared to home, which makes sense because this is a bizarro season with no fans in the Canadian division. But, does that factor in for you at all, Hammer? Because, we know that the Oilers have dominated the Jets all season long. I mean, we don't have to go over that. It's a fact at this point. But is that a factor for you? Because I look at it and I see this first game, and as we know in any series, if the Jets are able to steal that first game, I mean, the outlook of this series could be completely different.
Yeah, I mean, I think this year is obviously unique. You can look at the home, the Jets before these last couple wins, I think it dropped 7 in a row at home. Now, is that an indication they don't play well when they sleep in their own beds? I don't think so, but I don't think that home ice advantage isn't as prominent, I guess you could say, with how the season's going, obviously with COVID and no fans and all the things. I still think you want to play in your own barn. You know the nuances and the intricacies of your arena. It seems like Edmonton has a pretty good idea about the boards in Winnipeg too. I don't know if you guys remember that last game, but it was like they were shooting pucks off various areas of the boards with the right, bounce for their players. So, I don't know if it's as big a deal. I think you'd want that, obviously, that home ice advantage to begin with. You want to play more at home, regardless of what your records are. And I think there's a little bit of a tough situation as far as that back-to-back for the Jets, right? I mean, that to me is a bit of a disadvantage for home because you don't keep them on the road longer. You don't keep them, in hotel rooms longer. And you can't necessarily measure the impact of that, but, a guy doesn't have a good sleep. And, there's some guys out there that don't have good sleeps in hotels or have to do different things to get that rest. So anyways, getting a little too into that, but, I don't know if I would put too much stock necessarily into the road and home records as much as I would, this is a team that has struggled against the Oilers wherever they've played. And it's more fixing up those systems and coming up with a recipe to stop some of the bleeding that's happened against them, despite where exactly you're playing.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, because I know Dave. Dave's next. We usually do the Drew goes first, and I ask a question, then Dave goes here. But I just wanted to ask a follow up question, Jeff, because I think that's a good point that you make. And the main reason why I was asking you about the road versus home, I don't know how much of a factor it's going to be either, right? Like I think it's one of those things we always talk about when it comes to the playoffs. Like, does home ice advantage mean anything? Has it ever meant anything? So I'm kind of with you on that one, but. I wanted to ask you about the systems, and we're not going to go into, crazy X and O detail here, but what I mentioned earlier in the show, the one thing that I noticed that the Oilers were really successful against the Jets were, the defensemen pinching up a little bit on the defensive side in their own zone, creating turnovers, and then basically, Connor McDavid and some of the other speedier players on the Oilers just taking advantage. Like, is that something that is an absolute must for the Jets, just really being conservative with when they're pinching and making sure that they're not giving these turnovers and creating all these odd man rushes and breakaways, because it seems, during that season series that at times, the Oilers had, 5 or 6 breakaways every game.
Well, gap control is massive, right? I mean, it's massive against any team. It's particularly tough when you have the transition game that the Edmonton Oilers have. And that's the game that, we've been hearing about this game the Jets are trying to get to and the style in which they're trying to get to. And I think we've seen some progress in the defensive style, maybe in that, shutting down a little bit more and not leaving as many of those opportunities out there. But it's also trying to get that transition game. And Nick Ehlers is a big part of that transition game. So, that to me is, gap control, whether you want to put it on the defense and picking the right opportunities, when to pinch, when not to pinch. Obviously, that's going to be an important aspect of it. Another big part of it is going to have to be the forwards playing defense. Like Mark Scheifele, I don't mean to single him out particularly, but, he needs to be, as the number one center, better option to those defense if you don't have the kind of group that can, find that seam or pivot and deliver a pass to a guy while he's skating backwards or whatever. I'm not even trying to paint this crazy pass situation, because at the end of the day it comes down to just better support, right? I mean, we see that with Edmonton. We see they're not just a good transition game because they have Connor McDavid and that they have speed up front. They're a good transition game because they move as a unit with 5 of them, and there's available options. And when they're when a pass is made, that player knows where the next player is going to be. He has 1 or 2 options. Sometimes it's a quick one-time pass. Other times, they carry in and they dump it in. That they're on the same page, for lack of a better term. So to me, how do you fix that transition game, or how do you find that transition game that we've seen at the Jets at times? It's to have that better support from the forwards and not trying to stretch things out and kind of create that touchdown pass or those long kind of seam passes. Because at the end of the day, the Jets, what we've seen from them, maybe especially early on in the season when maybe they were able to mask some of their issues, is that they kind of live and die off chaos. Like they need to have something happen where a puck, gets poked away and all of a sudden it's a 2-on-1 and then skill takes over, right? That transition game helps you get to those situations where you can allow skill to take over, but it's that unity, it's that movement, that knowing where everyone is, and ultimately that's defining systems that lead to those opportunities that we just see the Jets kind of getting them and being good enough to finish on the few they've had. I mean, obviously that's been an issue. Scoring's been an issue maybe prior to these last 2 games, but certainly the gap control is going to be a major one, but also this part of that being more support from the forwards in that transition game.
Jeff Hamilton is our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show Saturday morning. We're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms. Reminder that Wednesday night, the first game between the Jets and the Oilers, the Illegal Curve post-game show gets underway right around 10:30, 10:40, right when the final buzzer sounds between the Jets and the Oilers.
Jeff, probably in this series, as much as we want to talk about all the forwards and all the defensemen, it's probably going to come down to those 2 guys between the pipes, Mike Smith and Connor Hellebuyck. And both goaltenders have had exceptional years. They're amongst the top leaders in a lot of the advanced stats goaltending categories. Goalies are voodoo. They're always difficult to understand. But what have you seen from Connor Hellebuyck in the last sort of stretch? We weren't really even certain if we were going to see him on Friday. But, he's such a, rhythm goaltender. He wanted to get that game in. Paul Maurice let him get that game in. But what have you seen from him of late to give you confidence to know? Because it seems to be the consensus the Jets are going to win this series. Connor Hellebuyck has to be the best player on the ice.
Yeah, I mean, he has to be the best player on the ice because no matter what team you are, if your goalie's not, or if he's average on the ice, it can take a pretty good team and make them an average team, right? It can also take an average team and make them a really good team. So in the Jets situation, yeah, Connor Hellebuyck has been leaned on a lot over the last couple of years and particularly last season. I mean, I always find it interesting as they go, he willed them to a playoff spot. I mean, they were points percentage extended playoff spot, but to me, it's, and that's not to take away Connor Hellebuyck's game. He was certainly awesome. But it's one of those things where there is going to be a heavy reliance on it. You don't want to have a heavy reliance on it. You want to help out your goalie. And I think that's, as far as what I've seen from Connor Hellebuyck, I mean, you look at, a couple shutouts over the last, handful of games here, which I think gives him some confidence. Now that Calgary game and Vancouver game were both, against opponents that, both didn't really seem to show up. I mean, we don't need to go into that too much, but at the same time, you look at last game, right? I mean, bad play on defense, giving, Engvall that kind of real estate. I mean, Pierre-Luc Dubois might have lost a puck race there too. Look, that's not an easy save, but that's a save that he needs to make. And if the Jets are going to win this series, Connor Hellebuyck needs to make those stops. Now, I'm not taking that, looking at that one snapshot and saying, oh, that was a difficult situation for him, or that went in, so, the Jets are screwed. But I do think that he needs to make the saves that are expected of him, and maybe a bit more if the Jets are gonna get through the series. And yes, is that a lot of pressure on him? Absolutely. But the thing about Connor Hellebuyck is he's so razor sharp focused that I don't think there's a single guy. I mean, there certainly are some doubters as far as, there's certainly some doubters out there with Connor Hellebuyck. I mean, I get emails all the time. I and in one notebook, it wasn't even a column, it was a notebook, a Jets notebook. I just said, because Connor Hellebuyck had been going through some tough times, and I just said, Hellebuyck, a goalie many regard as one of the best in the world, evident by the two, obviously the Vezina, the winner last year in nominations in 2 of the last 3 years. But people go, are you kidding me? The guy's a joke. There's no way that he's not playing well, yada, yada, yada. Well, that mentality that he has where every game's kind of a good game, that's a good attitude to have as a goalie, because, you look around the league and, you want to compare Mike Smith. Mike Smith, his confidence is high. But Mike Smith, we've seen in the past where you don't have a great game, or you get on a slide and head games become an issue. And he doesn't exactly have the track record, for that confidence. Again, he's having that this year, and you can see it, and he's proven that against the Jets. But at the same time, Connor Hellebuyck has been like, we've looked at games where it's like, woof, and all of a sudden it's like, guys, I like my game. Like that was a game. And so you kind of look at it, you're like, okay, but you want that mentality. You don't want a guy in the dumps. Another example, Jack Campbell. I mean, this guy has had a terrific season, played himself back into, a starting goalie position. And even he's had some mental, tough, has had his mentality, kind of tested here. And he admitted that things were getting too good, and he was kind of riding the highs and going with the lows of losses. So that just doesn't exist for Connor Hellebuyck. So the beauty in that, if you're Jets fans, is that, okay, say he comes out in game 1 and he lets in 2-3 suspect goals and the Jets lose. Well, Connor Hellebuyck isn't wearing that in game 2. And that's a big part of this. So, yes, he's going to be relied upon big time. He's going to have to play against tough he's going to have to play against a team that he has an .877 save percentage against, and is 2-5, and has been eaten alive on the power play. But he is a guy that I think you can trust. He's the least of the Jets' worries. And if I'm those players in those rooms, and they are not worried about him, it's about being better in front of him and giving him the best opportunity to steal a series that's going to eventually, lead to success in this playoffs.
Last question for you, Jeff. We got to put you on the spot. Your buddy Mike McIntyre in today's print edition of the Winnipeg Pre-Press put his prognostication hat on and said it's the Oilers in 5. From your perspective, looking at all the different factors that might come into play during this first round playoff matchup, what's your prediction on how it's going to turn out?
Yeah, you know what, it's I think picking series is a loser's game. But I mean, if you go with, if you got a gun to my head and I got to put money on a certain team, it's I don't think we've seen enough to suggest the Jets are going to win. So whether you want to say Oilers in 4, Oilers in 5, 6, 7, I think they're obviously the favorites for a reason. They've been playing a style of game that's been impressive and certainly has been reason for why they're the favorites in this. But so I will probably say Oilers in 6, but I'm more than happy to be proven wrong. And if they can, take some of the stuff we talked about earlier, whether it's that massive chip on their shoulder or whatever, and turn it, take this clean slate, or maybe take some of the highs and lows they've gone through. And if they have grown as a team, great, absolutely. Then, there's certainly a chance. But, from what we've seen and from the evidence in front of us, I mean, they're going to be in tough. And again, I have Oilers in 6, I suppose. But at the same time, it's if it's Jets in 6 or 7 or whatnot, I'm just hoping for a good series.
My favorite part of that answer was Jeff calling Drew a loser.
What?
You said predictions are for losers or something like that, but that's all good.
No. Predictions.
I didn't take it personally.
Right?
Don't worry.
Yeah. No. It's just
Jeff. More importantly, though, Jeff, you've created bulletin board material because now Blake Wheeler, who's a big fan of the show, he's gonna be like, "Oh, Hammer." He's not giving it to us. Okay, forget it. We're gonna do it now just to prove him wrong.
Well, yeah. So I was just gonna say, if Blake Wheeler's worried about what Jeff Hamilton's saying, if anyone's worried about what Jeff Hamilton's saying, I see some people in the comments saying what a media know, and I'm with you with the pitchforks as far as claiming whatever. We're just having fun talking hockey, and I might not know crap and whatnot, but we all have our opinions, and that's the beauty of this show. That's the beauty of this game, and the beauty of playoffs is anything can happen.
And Jeff, more importantly, they're listening and watching you right now. Give it so.
Yeah, they weren't. Yeah, I'm rubber, you're glue.
As the philosopher Kings on The Simpsons once said, when you're right 52% of the time, that means you're wrong 48% of the time. So that's what predictions are worth. Jeff Hamilton covers the Winnipeg Jets for the Winnipeg Free Press. You can read all about the Jets and the Oilers series and all the great coverage, sports, news, everything entertainment in the broadsheet known as the Winnipeg Free Press. Jeff, thanks very much for joining us this morning. Appreciate your time.
Absolute pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Hammer.
Our pleasure. There he goes, our buddy Jeff Hamilton. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, more on the Jets and the Oilers, and our buddy Frank Saravelli from TSN is going to join us coming up in the next hour. You're listening, you're watching, you're chatting with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We are live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whitened my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
While you can't always count on your team winning, nor your favorite player scoring, one thing you can always count on is Bernstein's Deli. They've expanded their services because the team at Bernstein's Deli wants to accommodate your needs and keep you safe. Open Tuesday to Saturday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. to serve you. Head to your phone, in-store or online to shop for groceries or order meals from the restaurant, like the legendary Illegal Curve Sandwich. Just go to bernsteinsdeli.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery.
Hour number 2 of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now. We're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms. This segment brought to you by our good friend, Dr. Les Reikus, and the team at Linden Market Dental Center, official dentist of Illegal Curve Hockey. Don't be an Ezzy. Always wear a mouth guard and give yourself peace of mind protection as well as facial, teeth, and mouth protection. To make an appointment to get your teeth to ting, visit lindenmarketdentalcenter.com. Always good to hear from our buddy Jeff Hamilton. Like I mentioned, Frank Saravelli, TSN senior hockey writer, set to join us in about 15 minutes time as well. Talk more about the Jets and the Oilers.
Do you want some breaking news?
Is it going to be about Cole Keller getting his first start for the AHL's Manitoba Moose?
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
We just broke it.
Yeah, I know. But tell people who Cole Keller is. They might not know who he is.
Drew, you're really stealing Dave's thunder here.
I did it on purpose. I saw it come up on Twitter as well, and I knew he was going to try and chime in with it.
Sandbagging son of a gun.
So tell people who Cole Keller is, Dave.
Cole Keller is a Manitoba-born goaltender who's had
Altona.
I think, again, it's funny. I said that before, and someone said he's not necessarily right from Altona, so I'm a little wary of that. So I didn't want to say
from Pembina Valley.
As you would know, you're Hockey Manitoba, so if anyone would know, it would be you. But the reality is, it's easy to do Southern Manitoba because that's more of a catch all for that entire region. Beautiful area, actually. But I'd love to go, but I'm banned from there for right now, as is everybody else. But I think that it's a really good opportunity for him. He's only come in and had 2 wins with the Moose in relief of Mikkel Burden, so good opportunity for him to get his first start. And
he might be a Winkler guy, actually.
That's why I was going to say, like, you got to be a little careful with that.
Hockey DB has him as Winkler, and Elite Prospects has him as Altona.
I was going to say, like, you always got to be careful because one's where they're born, and then someone else. I remember I was talking with someone else, but I mentioned this, and they're like, "Well, no, he's actually from like Miami," and then someone else said he's from here. So, anyways,
I should just text Eric Fair. He's from Winkler, so he would know, right?
There you go. Anyways, long story short, Drew, sorry to interrupt, but the point is that Cole Keller is getting his first start with the Moose. Big opportunity for him as they have 2 more games left in the season. They're playing tonight in Ottawa against Belleville, which is, I think, a 6 p.m. Central Time start. So that should be a good contest. Moose point streak is at 13 games, 10-0, 1-2. They are rolling along. No AHL playoffs for them. So they've got 2 more games left tonight and tomorrow, and then they are done. And then a lot of these guys will come up and be, not a lot, but a number of these guys will come up and be Black Aces. Although I saw someone sent me a message today that it looks like Leon Gavanke, the defenseman, Jets prospect, 2017 fifth, I think, Ezzy. No, I don't think so, actually. He's I don't remember what Ezzy would know that better than I would. But anyways, he's going to be playing, I think, in the World Championships with Germany. That's what someone just sent me that today. So I'll have to do some more research on that one.
There you go. There's today's Manitoba Moose update, courtesy of Dave Manouk, 2017 5th round pick, number 136 overall. You were right. Don't second guess yourself. Be confident.
Sorry, Dave. I actually wasn't paying attention. I was looking at something else. So,
were you watching the O-Dog race?
Yeah. Just watching the O-Dog race.
That's the kind of dedication we love to see from you there, Mr. Ginsburg. In any event, the Jets off today, so will be no media availability from the Winnipeg Jets. So if anybody was asking about an update, a health update about Dubois or Stastny, what Paul Maurice said after the game yesterday,
Pullman
or Ehlers, yeah. But Stastny and Dubois, of course, left the game early last night. What Paul Maurice said is that they may not necessarily practice when they're back on the ice on Sunday, but he said that they will both practice prior to game 1 against Edmonton, and they will both be in the lineup against the Oilers on Wednesday night. In the first hour when we were previewing the series, I was making a note for myself, and the note really says, it says attention to detail, because I think that is going to be the key for the Winnipeg Jets. They know what they have to do or what they cannot do against the Edmonton Oilers. It's that attention to detail that I think was lacking, certainly as the season got longer and as you saw the same opponents over and over again. And when it became an inevitability that the Jets were going to make the playoffs, that's what I think the Jets lost a little bit of, is that attention to detail and the element that they almost have to be perfect. Especially against the Connor McDavid and the Leon Draisaitl, they have to be so exacting with their deployments and with their decision making and I think that's sort of the fatigue factor of the regular season. Was a part of the reason why the Jets struggled so heavily over the last month or so. So that, I think, to me, is what I'm really going to be watching for on Wednesday night, especially early in that contest on Wednesday night. That attention to detail. Do you see that attention to detail from the Winnipeg Jets? And if you do, then I think that they can be competitive, certainly, against the Oilers. If that attention to detail is still lacking, well, then I don't think it's going to be a very long series. So to me, that is one of the key factors entering Wednesday night's game 1.
How many times did you just say attention to detail? I counted at least 5.
I wanted to say it enough times to make sure you were listening. I wanted, I know how distracted you get, so I figured what did they say? If you meet somebody, say their name 3 times in a row. I figured factor in the Ginsburg factor there. You got to go with 5 times to make sure you're paying attention.
I don't know about you guys. I have to say someone's name at least like 80 times. for me to remember their name. But no, you're right, Drew. I mean, I would say that the Jets don't have to be perfect to beat the Oilers, but they have to be near perfect to shut down Connor McDavid for sure. But there's no doubt that at times, especially during that losing streak, their attention to detail wasn't there, especially on the homestand, right, guys? Like there were just too many parts of that game where the Jets just didn't seem engaged, right? And that's why I think, towards the end of that losing streak, Paul Maurice talked about emotion and how the Jets were having trouble, getting up for these games toward the end of the season when they knew that all they were playing for was clinching third, right? Because you didn't have the fans and you didn't, quite frankly, have a lot to play for. And I agree with you, Drew. I mean, you were right. The last kind of 6 to 10 games of the season were not riveting hockey games. So I do think that the Jets are going to have to really be sharp in their fundamentals. And, if the Jets aren't flying and scoring off of the rush and in transition or getting those power play opportunities, and we know they feed off of their power play, and obviously, there have been some ups and downs, but it's still a really good power play. That's something that, is also going to be a factor here, guys, because the Oilers not only have, the best power play in the NHL, their penalty killing is pretty good as well. So if you can win the special teams battle, that's obviously going to help. But I mean, they're going to have to find an answer for Connor McDavid. They're going to have to score more goals than they did in the season series. They're going to need help from Pierre-Luc Dubois and Paul Stastny. Scheifele, Connor, and Wheeler, they have to be going, but they can't do it all. So Kopilar, Appleton, you have to get some offense from them as well. If the fourth line can chip in, if you can get a goal from Trevor Lewis, Dave, or Jansen Harkins, if he's on that fourth line, that's going to help as well. But you're right, Drew, like, they're going to need, I'm just reading the Kornikova comment from Joe from Winnipeg, so I got a little bit distracted there. I still haven't found the Anna Kornikova poster that I was talking about on yesterday's postgame show, but there's no doubt the Jets are the underdog, and they're going to have to be much better than they were during the regular season series, but I still think they can win the series. I don't think Edmonton is this absolute juggernaut. They happen to have two of the best players in the world, but they're not. They have flaws. We talked about it. Like, their bottom six isn't anything to write home about, and their defense is good, led by Darnell Nurse and Tyson Barrie, but it's not like a top 3 defense in the NHL. So this is still a series that you can absolutely win if you're the Jets, and it doesn't look like it's winnable, maybe because you lost 7 of 9 against the Oilers, but we'll see what happens. That's why they play the games, as they say.
Exactly. And what I was going to say, one of the things that I was looking back on Connor McDavid, you may want to go, if you're the Jets, you may want to go back and watch the tape of a Calgary game or the Montreal games, because 3 times both those teams shut him out and didn't let him get a point. So clearly they were able to do something that now he had points against them in other games, obviously based on his 104-point season. But again, there's opportunity to watch what other teams have been able to do successfully and to try and do that. And again, like I said, the Jets did win 2 of the first 3 games in the series. So I agree with you, Ez. I don't think the Oilers are some juggernaut that are invincible. They happen to be playing better hockey, but they're a beatable team. And Mike Smith has had an excellent season. Let's not try and make any bones about it. He's been phenomenal, but he's not this like 3-time Stanley Cup winner who, once he's in the zone, is locked in to the point we were talking about earlier. Like he's a goaltender who's got some flaws. So he's looked good and he's got a good body of work to draw on, and his muscle memory will be strong. But I don't think the series is unwinnable for the Winnipeg Jets. I'm not.
Yeah, I was just going to say the knock to Hammer talked about this a little bit. The knock on Mike Smith has always been, the mental side of the game, right? And that's obviously, right. We've seen, that he's had a good year here, but sometimes when he lets in a bad goal or a couple bad goals, that's right. Sometimes he can get on himself, right? So
and that's the point. Is I think that's the key. And look, for the Jets, being on the road isn't a bad thing. I mean, again, forget about the record and that sort of thing. I just think like you get on the road, you're focused on, playing the game. There's no outside distractions. You don't have to worry about what's going on at home. So that's I mean, again, obviously it's not less than ideal to not have first change, but I really think it's an opportunity for these guys. If they get an early goal on Mike Smith, if they get rolling a little bit, if they get that little taste, guys, it's not like, again, like I said, the Jets have been in a bad month. If you want to, I'm not going to put on rose-colored glasses and pretend like the last month for the Jets has been a good one. I mean, we're not here to blow smoke up their butts. Like this isn't what this is all about. So the reality is you have to be realistic and talk about what you're seeing in front of you. And so far but overall in the course of the year, the Jets have been a good team, right? This is a team that didn't lose 2 games in a row for how long, right? So that was the narrative for the majority of the season. But the reality is, again, then they went on a slide where they lost 7. So that's what your more recent memory of this team is. But again, was a good team consistently throughout the course of the year. So again, I'm not suggesting that Edmonton's some juggernaut. I don't think Toronto's some juggernaut. I think all the teams in the NHL have flaws. I think that's just the reality of hockey. I think that Connor Hellebuyck is an X factor. I think he can be the best player. I mean, he's a Vezina winner. He didn't win the Vezina by mistake. He didn't win the Vezina by accident. So he's still an excellent goaltender. And I saw someone earlier say that he's not a guy who can win big games for you, but he's won some pretty big games in the series to get the Jets to the conference finals a couple years ago.
I think that's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
I remember him winning a game 7 on the road.
Well, absolutely, and he led the Jets to the Western Conference Final. So
so that's all I'm saying. So it's just a function of, like I said, we have to be realistic here. I mean, again, the Jets have flaws. The Oilers have flaws. I think that's the key. The Oilers are the best player in the world. There's no doubting that. You can't even pretend like it's anywhere even close to anybody who has Connor McDavid's skill or ability. Mm-hmm. But again, like I said, there's teams that have been able to neutralize him and minimize his impact against them. So that's what that's the job of you. And again, that's the advantage of having 5 days between your series. Get your guys healed up, get your guys ready, get your guys focused, and get your guys ready to face one of the best players in the league.
And hope that the Canucks injure a number of the Oilers players in their meaningless game this afternoon. But that's a separate issue entirely. For me, what I want to see again from the Jets, and I talked about attention to detail sort of at the start of this segment. So many of those games against Edmonton, the Jets just dumped the puck in behind Mike Smith, and it was out of the zone before they could even get a chance to get in on them. That's the kind of thing that they can't happen in this series. You have to make sure that your dump-ins, when possible, are better placed. They're put into the corner where they're not, within the trapezoid, and he can't be a factor. If you're not going to be able to carry the puck in and establish possession that way, and with Nikolai Ehlers' status as a question mark, and we know he's the best Jets zone entry player, if you're going to have to play that dump and chase game, and you always have to do it at certain points, during a game and during a series. There's no question about that. It has to be more educated dump-ins. It can't just be ring it around the boards, because Mike Smith will feast on you in that situation. Right. And time again, when the Jets and the Oilers played in the regular season, that just seemed to be what the Jets' approach was. And then no wonder it was back out of the Oilers zone before the Jets had any opportunity to get any offensive zone time. It just can't work that way. So that's what I'm talking about, the attention to detail. There's no magic formula for defeating the Edmonton Oilers. You just have to be, sharper than the opponent. You have to make sure that your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, quicker and...
Are they signing contracts?
More precisely, I'm ignoring you, quicker and more precisely than the Oilers are with their attention. I mean, this Oilers team, look... Playoff-wise,
they're beatable, Drew. They're absolutely beatable.
Look, they somehow lost to the Blackhawks in the bubble last year, which was an abomination.
You're not going to completely shut down McDavid. He's going to get his points. You're right. You have to keep the puck away from Smith. He's one of the best puck-handling goalies in the league. But you mentioned something else that I think is just as important, probably more important. Offensive zone time, sustained pressure, all of those cliches, dictating the pace of play. Like you have to see that more in this series, because in the series, the regular season series, of course, the Jets just didn't have that, right? Like it was, you had some good scoring chances, like the high danger chances in those games. Like I don't have it in front of me, but the high danger chances in most of those games were heavily in favor of Edmonton. So that's what you're going to want to see. You're going to want to see, players going to the middle of the ice. If a clean zone entry isn't there, not only dump the puck in away from Smith, get the puck back, start a cycle up, have some zone time, keep the puck in their zone as opposed to, having the puck in your own zone. And you're right, there isn't a magic formula to beating Edmonton. There's no magic formula for any team. I mean, that magic formula is often Connor Hellebuyck, right? So I agree with you. I think the Jets can win this series, and Hellebuyck absolutely has the opportunity to steal some games.
And there he is joining us in the bottom of left of the corner, TSN senior hockey writer, a good friend of Illegal Curve, going back to his days it was the Philly Daily News, right, Frank?
It was, yeah. It's been way too long, guys.
Nice to see you, buddy. How are things?
Really good here. What's going on with you guys?
Hey, living the dream. We're in lockdown still in Winnipeg, so we got nothing but time to talk about the hockey and talk about the Jets and the Oilers, and obviously that's what brought you on. We sort of survived this, at least from my perspective, the last 8, 10, 12 games of this regular season really became a struggle for a lot of these teams where the playoffs were assured. So it's time to get going with the playoffs, and I know that I'm excited for that, and I assume the same from your perspective.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I understand why some teams sort of hit I don't know if you want to call it dog days of the season, but when your spot is clinched and you really can't move too far up or down in the standings, there's not a lot to play for. And I look at a team like the Jets. I thought, at a certain point this year, you could have made the argument we're the best team in the North Division coming down the stretch. Obviously, that wasn't the case. Injuries played a big part, but I'm curious if they can find a way to flip the switch.
Well, and that's, I guess, where we'll start. Frank, obviously they have the Edmonton Oilers in the first round, and the Oilers, simply dominated the Winnipeg Jets in the regular season. The numbers were as one-sided gets, in terms of, NHL competition. So from your perspective and what you've seen of the Jets, how do they sort of flip that narrative? How do they flip that switch so that, Connor McDavid is going to eat, but how do you make sure it's not an all-you-can-eat buffet for the world's best player?
As crazy as this sounds, obviously you need to defend well against Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. That's a given. But I kind of think you have to push that aside. And I know that sounds nuts to say. You've got to win the 35 minutes that Connor McDavid isn't on the ice. That's really, to me, is the difference in this series. The Jets have a clear advantage in depth, and you need to play to your strength. And I'll go to the wily old veteran in Ken Hitchcock. He joined us on our podcast, the DFO Rundown, a couple weeks back, and he was still a consultant for the Oilers. And he was talking about Edmonton and their playoff success. And he said, what wins in the Stanley Cup playoffs is the 1-4-9 ratio. And I said, I've been around hockey a long time. What the heck is that? And he said, it's 1 goalie, 4 defensemen, and 9 forwards. You have to get your team to the point where you're comfortable throwing any one of those players on the ice at any given time in a series, and they're going to win the battle. Now, here's the truth about the Edmonton Oilers. They don't have that. They don't have 9 forwards that they can throw over the bench and be confident that they're going to win in any situation at any time. The Jets do. Certainly when they're healthy, they do. I think they've got the best top 6 in the North. The question is, can they take advantage of all of that and outscore whatever Connor McDavid and the Oilers do? So, yes, they're going to get their points. Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl had 14 points in their 4-game series against the Chicago Blackhawks and still lost. Mm-hmm. So, let's put that aside and focus on what you do have instead of what you don't.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Frank. And the question I wanted to ask you was, how big of a factor do you think that Pierre-Luc Dubois is going to be in this series from your perspective? Because we know, Patrick Laine's season, went off the rails really quickly under John Tortorella, but, Dubois has struggled big time. No points in his last, I forget if it's 9 games or 10 games. He's really struggling offensively. Like, how big of a key is he versus, some of the other players that we know have to be really good offensively, like Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, Blake Wheeler?
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, he's been on a milk carton. Have you ever seen a trade where 2 teams lost? Usually one wins, one loses, or they both win. They both seem to be losing at this point. I don't know that that's possible. It has been so strange. And it's funny because the Jets were kind of taking it between the eyes for a little while to start. Roslovic jumps out to this point-per-game start in his hometown with the Blue Jackets. Laine scores early, and you're thinking, Dubois didn't even get on the ice yet, and they're already in the hole. And then at a certain point, Pierre-Luc got his game going, and those guys started to fall off, and then now the wheels fell off of everyone, and you're like, holy smokes, how does this happen? But to answer your question specifically, that's why he's here. It was to change the look of this group and have maybe the best 1-2 punch. How many teams can legitimately look at their roster and say, we have 2 number 1 centers? They happen to be facing a team in the Oilers that can also say that if McDavid and Draisaitl are on separate lines. But the answer is not very many. And Pierre-Luc Dubois hasn't played to that. But this has been such a weird year. Little time to practice, little time off. little time to get adjusted, little time to spend time with your teammates in an environment that's fun and relaxing. And there's nothing more fun than playoff hockey. So my guess is that you'll see him show up, but the question is, how big of an impact will he be?
We're joined on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show by Frank Saravelli. You know Frank, of course, as the TSN senior hockey writer, talking about the Jets and Oilers and the entirety of the Stanley Cup playoffs. We're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms.
You know, Frank, we have to talk about Mike Smith, even though we generally focus on the Winnipeg Jets here on this show. But Mike Smith, you wrote about him 2 days ago. He's been such a good story on TSN. You had called him the comeback player of the year. How good a story is this for a guy who's been in hockey as long as he has?
It's insane. I mean, Mike Smith was essentially left for dead last year when the playoffs ended. Who's going to possibly re-sign Mike Smith, let alone come back to the Edmonton Oilers? Game 1 start in the bubble. Oilers are the 5 seed. They have the home ice advantage, if you will, in their friendly confines in Edmonton, and they get booted. Mike Smith played a big role in that. Game 1, 26 minutes, 5 goals against. He sits on the bench. Mikko Koskinen comes in and gives you sterling .860 goaltending. Never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined that the Oilers would go back into this season with the same exact tandem. They tried on Jacob Markstrom. They didn't get him. And so they took that $6 million and they said, we're going to spend that on Tyson Barrie at 3.75. We're going to spend that on Kyle Turris at 1.65. And we're going to spend that on Mike Smith at 1.5. That's a pretty good way to spend $6 million when you end up with the highest scoring defenseman in the league and a goaltender who comes out and saves your season. You got to remember the Oilers were 6-7 before Mike Smith made his first start of the year. He started the year on LTIR. And here's this 38, soon to be 39-year-old where confidence has waned in the market. The Oiler fans are spewing venom because they re-signed him. And he comes in and has the best season in his last 11 and puts this team right squarely where they needed to be. Since Mike Smith entered the crease, the Oilers have the 3rd best record in terms of points percentage in the NHL. A fantastic story, a guy who works hard, is liked by his teammates, has a competitive fire that rages, and also changed his game a little bit. You know, I think it was best described by Kevin Woodley, the In Goal magazine guru, saying that Mike Smith's flops per game were down over 60 were down. Like, he just looks more smooth. He looks more flexible. And obviously he's a guy that competes and has an ability shown from his Calgary days and Arizona as well to steal a series.
You know, Frank, obviously this year the teams are sort of unprecedented in how familiar they are with one another. Normally when it's been in division, it's been 5 games or maybe 6 games they played against each other. When game 1 between the Jets and the Oilers happened, that'll be the 10th game. From the coaching perspective, from Dave Tippett's perspective and Paul Maurice's perspective, you're obviously not going to scrap everything you've done and wipe the whiteboard clean. But how important are sort of tweaks and small alterations going to be when it comes to the chess match and the coaching chess match of these series? And that this isn't specific to the Jets and the Oilers. This can be really considered on the entire macro Stanley Cup playoff level.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be enormous because I think by now you would at least have the understanding of what does and doesn't work. And, you've seen, if you're Connor McDavid, you've seen a lot of Adam Lowry or whatever the specific individual matchup in that series is. And I would think that, not only is it a chance to, find out what does and doesn't work, but with these Canadian teams specifically, there was a period for experiment and to see, once these seeds were kind of locked in and the Leafs play the Habs 4 times in 13 days, well, like you'd at least get a better idea of the rest of what you might want to do. And I'm sure that there were coaches, to be quite honest, over the last number of weeks that kept a few things up their sleeve. What new wrinkle can I throw at this team? At a certain point, hockey is hockey and there are no tricks or secrets, but I think that there's little things that these coaches have been thinking of a long time. I'm not going to tip my hand. Here's what I'm going to come out in game 1 and try and do. And we'll see if the other team can match that.
Frank, we have to ask you about the Habs and the Leafs, first playoff meeting since 1979, which is just incredible. And the Leafs obviously are the heavy favorite here, and they were very successful against the Habs during the regular season. Like, what is your kind of assessment of this series? Like, I know a lot of people are picking to win the Leafs to win the series, and some in 4 games, others in 5 games. I think, I haven't seen anybody say, Leafs in 7. I certainly haven't seen a lot of people taking the Habs, but how big of a factor do you think, having a healthy Brendan Gallagher, having a healthy Carey Price, like, does that, move the needle enough, or do you still think, the Leafs are going to take this series, and whether it's, 5 games, 6 games?
Well, first off, I think we should start a drinking game. Anytime someone says 1979, you have to do a shot, because honestly, I've heard it so many times over the last 10 days that, like, I'm tired of it. I get it. I know 1979, and that's not a shot at you guys. I'm just saying, like, everyone would be plastered if you could start that up in the playoffs.
And you could listen to the Smashing Pumpkins song 1979 as well, right?
Yeah, whatever you need. Like on That's Hockey, we had Gino Reda and Craig Button put up pictures of what they looked like in 1979. I mean, not available for me because I wasn't born yet, but
you were born in the 90s, Frank.
I was born in the 80s, 1988.
Oh, okay.
But I just don't look like it, and that's fine. But to answer your question in a serious way, I think that the Leafs have a clear advantage, and Brendan Gallagher to me is the X factor. You can say what you want about Carey Price being healthy and Shea Weber getting rest. Shea Weber's clearly a different player when he gets a chance to take a break. You see him at the start of the season and how good he is, and then you see him when it gets to game 82, or in this case 56, and he looks like he's really struggling to get to the finish line. But Brendan Gallagher is the heartbeat of the Habs. And you look at the games that they've played against Toronto, specifically leading up to this playoff run without Gallagher, and they look like they don't have any fight. You need that maniacal Brendan Gallagher, blood coming out of his mouth, smirking at you from the bench, playoff hockey face that he brings. And he drags everyone on his team into the fight. So they haven't had it. Obviously, they've dealt with a number of other injuries. And I always thought that the Habs were so well positioned for the playoffs. They're built to be a playoff team. They're tough, they're big, they're strong, they're hard to play against. And they've also got the speed and creativity up front to really do some damage in the playoffs. You saw it in the bubble last year. Now they've got, essentially since they've gotten in, they're playing with house money. They're playing against a Leaf team that, for all their success this year, they A, still have flaws, and B, still have a giant monkey to get off their back from last year and the number of years prior where they've had first round failures. This core has accomplished nothing, and they know that in Toronto, and there's pressure to do, and this year specifically, to make a big run given the trade deadline acquisitions that they've made. They've pushed their chips in. They know this is a special year, a special opportunity, only needing to get through the North to get to the Final Four. And they get it, but you can't do any of that without beating the Habs in round 1. And to do it soundly and quickly would go a long way.
Frank Saravelli, TSN senior hockey writer, is our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Saturday morning, we're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms talking about the Stanley Cup Playoffs, which, of course, get underway later on tonight.
What's better than this?
Nothing's better than this, buddy. With the actually, the only thing better is the fact that the regular season still isn't over and the Stanley playoffs start tonight.
Why do you have to remind us of that? Like, those games don't exist. They're happening in the afternoon.
It's true. And they might, like we said on our post-game show yesterday, they might as well happen in Portugal for all the attention that those games are going to get, because nobody's sitting there with bated breath to see how these Canucks and Flames games are going to wrap up that next week.
Yeah, what's the only rule here? Someone don't die. That's it.
That is definitely the only rule that was in the Jets and the Leafs game last night. That was a no-hitter.
Didn't apply, by the way. Didn't apply. Couple of guys who left the game early with injuries, so it's not necessarily that it applied there.
Exactly. I think everyone's holding their breath.
Yeah,
no,
and and by the way, Frank, if you need shots, Seagram's just became an official sponsor of Illegal Curve, so we do have Fireball whiskey if you need some of that. So
actually, I'm going to make a confession here. I'm not allowed to drink Fireball. My wife and I, we've been married for 7 years. And when we started dating, it was kind of like right when Fireball came out. And I love it. I love the taste of it. It's like, honestly, I could drink it all day. But I figured out, and I don't know why this is. So, and I know we're saying this live and people are going to be watching this. I drink Fireball and I get super emotional and I don't know why. And we after the second time I drank it, my wife was like, never again. And if you ever buy that, I'm out. So that's where we stand. I love Fireball, love the taste, but no go for me in this house.
Okay. Well, we've got other varieties of whiskey that we can hook you up with. So that's not an issue. But
Perfect.
Frank, the question I have is, do you have any insight as to what's happening after the conference finals? I mean, to get to the conference finals in terms of the Canadian government, what the plan is there? Because of course, and it's such a disparity, right? In the American buildings, they've got fans. Here in Canada, of course, there are no fans. That's going to create a bit of an imbalance. What are you hearing in that regard?
I know you guys are living in a different country, but it might as well be a different world compared to what's happening here in the US. I mean, it is, we just went to no masks in grocery stores, no masks anywhere, nearly full buildings. Nashville is going to be almost 13,000. Florida's at 50%. The Vegas Golden Knights are trying to get to 100% by June 1st. It's a totally different world. And so to answer your question, I think with the U.S. teams mostly being vaccinated, and the NHL expects 5 to 7 teams to be fully vaccinated, that 85%, that they can sort of relax restrictions as the Stanley Cup playoffs start. That's huge in terms of getting the Canadian team to play round 3 in their own building. It's not about health and safety for the Canadian government. It's about optics. And unfortunately, that's so much of what politics are. And not to make it political, but in this case, that the team coming into your country, the American team, to go in and out freely across the border like any normal playoff series would have previously, they're coming in and they're going to be fully vaccinated. And so when they come to your city, they're going to try and make it a bubble, but there's no real risk to the general public. First off, you really can't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. And second, they're safe. They're not carrying the disease or the virus with them. So that's one big thing that the NHL has in its pocket with these negotiations with the government. And by all accounts, it's been really positive. So there's a lot of optimism that they can actually play this round 3. The Canadian team can do it in their building. They're obviously going to be at a disadvantage going into the U.S. In a building that's going to have fans because all the playoff teams have some level of capacity. And it's still a win for that team in Canada, whoever emerges as king of the North, because they're going to at least get to sleep in their own beds and play in their own home arena for their home games as opposed to moving to the U.S. So not done yet. June 1st is the deadline when the NHL needs to know, but it certainly seems like it's trending in that direction.
Frank, we'll let you go on this last question. Of all the other playoff series, we've covered basically the North Series, and like so often this year, it seems like the other divisions have happened in a vacuum that may or may not exist. Which of the other playoff series are you most intrigued by? I mean, because there are some fascinating series, especially in that poorly named Central Division. I look at that Panthers Lightning series, first time ever that the Battle of Florida takes place. And I mean, I think it'll be a surprise to very many people up here in Canada that the Florida Panthers are actually ahead of the Lightning in the standings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like whatever didn't happen in Canada this year didn't happen. So that's the exact series that I have my eye on. I was pitching my bosses saying, hey, can I get to that? I'm fully vaccinated. I want to cover that series. That series is going to be bananas. Not only, I think, first off, I think the Panthers are going to win the series.
Nice.
They're a hard team to play against. And I know that the Lightning are likely to get Kucherov and Stamkos back for game 1. And that certainly changes the complexion of it. But it's been a little bit of a roller coaster this year for Tampa, and Florida hasn't had any dips. We were all waiting for the wheels to fall off. You look at the games that they've played, they've been unbelievable. 136 penalty minutes last game, a suspension, a couple fines. The hockey's going to be good. The environment's going to be fantastic. And the Panthers are no joke. So at the very least, what you're going to get is a great series, if not an upset. And there's so many great stories. Aside from those guys coming back from injury, you've got Sam Bennett coming in from Calgary and just where'd that come from? And so he's a great story. And you've got, maybe the best goalie, not in the league, but on the planet in Andrei Vasilevsky and so many other things going on. Bill Zito, first-year GM, going against the Cup champs, and taking a couple pages from their playbook in terms of how they built their roster. And I just think the fact that it's drivable, the fact that it's 2 markets that in Canada don't move the needle, don't sleep on that series because it's going to be so good.
It will be. Frank Saravelli is TSN senior hockey reporter. He's also co-host of the DFO Hockey Rundown podcast. Frank, it's good to see you, buddy. Next time you're in town, we'll have to get back out. We'll keep the fireball crossed, and we'll give you something else instead.
We'll take Frank back to Hermanos.
I'm in wherever, guys. It'd be great to see you guys, and it would just be great to be back in Winnipeg. I haven't left my house in 14, 15 months, and I'd love to get back to Canada.
Frank, I don't know if you remember this. We always talk about this, because we talk about you often. I would say probably on a daily basis, if not a weekly basis. But we always talk about, I don't know if you remember, but you mentioned your family earlier, but we were with you when you found out that you were expecting your first child. I don't know if you remember that. That
must have been do not remember
7 or 8 years ago. Yeah, we were at
Hermanos. We were at Hermanos for dinner.
Wow, yeah. How about that?
And then,
amazing, guys.
So how long ago was that? That must have been.
My son turned 7.
7 years ago,
on June 23rd. So yeah.
Well, next time you'll have to bring the family up, and we'll make it a real family.
I'm sure you mentioned that to your family all the time, right? That you were with the Illegal Curve guys.
I honestly had no idea that was the case. I remember like a few hazy nights with you guys, maybe having a little bit too much to drink and a lot of fun. But it's I can't wait to get back together.
Yeah, you came back. If I recall correctly, you came back to the table and you sort of looked a little ashen. And I think that's when because you were on the phone finding out that you weren't going to be Frank Saravelli anymore. You're going to be Daddy Saravelli at that point in time.
What a life. What a journey it's been.
Frank, appreciate your time, buddy. Be well.
Thank you, guys. Enjoy the playoffs.
Thanks, Frank. Take care. There he goes, Frank Saravelli of TSN and the DFO Rundown podcast. Let's take a break. When we come back, more on the Jets and Oilers. We'll give our predictions as well. You're listening, you're watching, you're chatting with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We are live Saturday morning on YouTube and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours, and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
While you can't always count on your team winning, nor your favorite player scoring, one thing you can always count on is Bernstein's Deli. They've expanded their services because the team at Bernstein's Deli wants to accommodate your needs and keep you safe. Open Tuesday to Saturday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. to serve you. Head to your phone, in-store or online to shop for groceries or order meals from the restaurant, like the legendary Illegal Curve Sandwich. Just go to bernsteinsdeli.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Saturday morning, welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mindell, Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsburg, obviously chewing something because he couldn't have done that during the break. Juju.
Well, technically, he wasn't doing it during the break. He just brought it into the.
I see. Good. No, that's a high quality.
I know people think that that I'm eating salads or kale, during the show. No,
nobody thinks that.
I'm fueled by jujubes.
If you don't think that there's already been 17 7-Eleven comments.
Jokes. Yeah, you haven't been paying enough attention to the chat if you haven't seen all the 7-Eleven jokes at your expense. I do appreciate that you were eating the jujubes before 9 a.m. this morning. That is a dedication to sugar that you don't see outside of 6-year-olds very often. So kudos to you.
Yeah, but 9 in the morning is not the same for me. You got to understand, I was up at 20 to 6 this morning with my kids. So 9 o'clock is like 11 o'clock for me.
Just 11 o'clock being a perfectly normal time to be having jujubes.
Exactly.
Yes, David.
No, I was going to say a little bit of news for the Tuesday show that we're still working on. Assistant General Manager of the Jets / General Manager of the Manitoba Moose, Craig Heisinger, is going to join us. So that's exciting. That's a good first guest on the show.
What time is the show happening? Like, I mean,
it's still a work in progress. We're thinking 5 to 7. It looks like it may be like a 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock show.
Dave, we have no idea what show you're talking about.
I'm in negotiation. It's okay. all a process. But Craig Heisinger,
let us know, the day and time.
General manager
of
the Jets is going to be there, so he'll be a good guest. He can give us some insight into some of these players that came out of nowhere and have had a big impact with the Manitoba Moose. I also just like dropping these names randomly on you about this show that you guys have no idea about.
Yeah, you're doing a great job at concealing the details from us, and I appreciate that. But that's okay. You'll let us know if and or when you need our services. But sure. If you don't, if it's the Dave Minuk experience, that's perfect.
Maybe it may just be a Dave Minuk experience. We'll see.
Yeah, well, can't go wrong with that experience. Let me tell you, that's a wild ride. Want to make mention, of course, of something that we do each and every time that the playoffs start. And I spoke to our good friends at Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club earlier this week about it. The ICOT pool, hashtag ICOT pool, will be back potentially as early as tonight. So when any playoff game goes into overtime, tweet at Illegal Curve, use hashtag ICOT pool. Tell us who you think is going to score the overtime winner. If you choose correctly, you may very well win tickets to a show with our good friends at Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club. Of course, you're going to say, well, Drew, Rumors isn't open yet. That's true, but they're very eager to reopen. They are champing at the bit to reopen. So as soon as they reopen, you'll have a certificate in your hand. You can go out, maybe take your loved ones, maybe take your family members, maybe take some not so loved one. It's really up to you. You can get some tickets to go to Rumors simply by watching overtime with us and using hashtag ICOT pool.
I agree with what, I agree with what Jeff Hamilton said during the first hour when we had him on. Like, this is the best time of year. Frank mentioned it as well. And obviously we love the ICOT pool. I was going to say my favorite part is every year that person or a couple people that try to, get their correct death in.
After.
Like Nikita Kucherov will score the OT winner, and then you'll get 2 or 3 people that, tweet at us Nikita Kucherov. That's always my favorite because and it seems like it's always kind of like the same people that do it. But
there's two jokes that we get. We get that one, the guy or gal who thinks being funny.
1980s Jets.
That's
guy
right.
or gal. What is this, the 1960s, Drew?
There's nothing. Thank you, Ezra. Or the person who says that, we're going to take Stan Smeal to score for the Vancouver Canucks in the ICOT pool.
I just want to know,
been done.
Drew, how much do you pay Ronnie? Because he just likes you too much. He wants to do a show with you. He thinks you and he would do a great job doing a hockey show. And Ronnie, you'll never have a good show with Drew because you can't always agree with everything he says. That's terrible.
Well, the truth is that Ronnie is actually my alter ego. It's just me under a different name. So, Don't tell anybody. Shh, that's a secret.
Actually, that's not true. I actually, Drew, for the record, I've met Ronnie. I believe I met Ronnie. I did meet Ronnie. And he said to me right in my face, I like your show, but Drew's my favorite. And I was like, okay.
Well, he's got good taste. What can I say?
And the thing is, nobody likes Drew the best, right, Dave? It's usually me or you. So obviously, Ronnie is a good guy. He knows what he's talking about.
Well, and you could just say nobody likes me, period. I mean, that would be perfectly fine.
Not true. That's not true. Your wife probably does. Your kids do.
My kids definitely. My wife depends on the day and the time and the circumstances, but that's usually to be expected with any loving marriage.
We're too hard on you, Drew. I have to. Sometimes it goes through my head like people realize this is all a shtick, right? Like Drew is the biggest sweetheart. He's the best guy.
I'm actually
the villain.
And Ezzy, for the record, Drew thrives on this. Drew likes this.
Oh, yeah.
Drew loves this kind of stuff. So I mean,
Stroking the ego. Yeah.
And it's funny because we've had comments sometimes with people who don't. I mean, obviously with the people who've been following our show for the last decade and plus, they know the shtick between this group, but at the same time, sometimes
you would know, Dave, you've been part of the show for 12 years, right?
Oh yes, absolutely, from day one. Absolutely,
Richie was never part of the show.
There was never anybody other than Dave.
Well, there's two ongoing questions that are always my favorite. The first one, like people who just tune in randomly, like they don't really seem to like each other, and that's sort of part of the routine. And second of all,
and they're right.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, exactly. But you don't have to love each other to get the job done. And the second one is also my favorite. Is so just exactly how old is Drew, anyways? Because everyone seems to think that I'm about in my mid to late 60s. Which, newsflash, I'm not, as you can see with this baby face that I got.
Yeah, now that you've and your old babysitter Richard Weiss, he's still a big fan of yours. So you still got some fans, Drew. Anyways, we've interjected enough.
Let's go.
I gotta get before we get into the next series, Drew. We're
not getting into the next series. You still got to give me predictions for this series.
Okay, well, we'll give our predictions for the Jets and Oilers. But I got a text from my good friend Adam Florence. I've been friends with him. You guys know Flojo really well, as I call him. Went to school with him since I was 5 years old.
Hang on. There's only one Flojo, and that's Florence Joyner.
She's Olympic athlete. Yes.
And second of all, have you ever actually called Adam Florence Flojo before this?
Yeah, I've been calling him Flojo since high school.
Okay.
Oh.
He texted me. This is a hilarious text because we were previewing the Habs Leafs series with Frank Saravelli. He texted me. So I don't know if I mentioned this. He lives in Montreal. He texted me. I'm at a kid's birthday party with Shea Weber's kids and wife.
Does he know if Shea Weber is going to be healthy?
Shea Weber, so Shea's not there. Thought that was funny.
That's true. He might be at practice or something. Does he know if Shea's healthy for
Adam's
for game
daughter
one?
goes to daycare with Shea Weber's kids.
Does he know if Shea Weber's going to be healthy for game one? That the inquiring minds want to know.
Hold on. I'll get that answer right now.
As you have the possibility of being an insider with extra R's.
Well, actually, you're the insider with 3 R's after your Cole Perfetti news from earlier this week, Dave. Now, Ezzy will be the insider with 4 or 5 R's, which is ironic because I think that's how he normally thinks insider is spelled to begin with.
At least I know how to spell hygiene.
It's true. You do know how to spell hygiene.
Ouch.
Give me some predictions, guys. Let's go. We've talked about the Jets and the Oilers. We'll talk more about the Jets and the Oilers. I'm looking on my second screen here. Some of our friends at Sportsnet have come out with their predictions for the Jets and the Oilers, and it is overwhelmingly leaning towards the Oilers. So give me your predictions on the Jets and the Oilers.
I'm going Jets in 6, and I realize that, as you just
Jets
mentioned,
in 6.
Most people are taking the Oilers, but it's a new season, and I do think that the Jets are somewhat rejuvenated after that long losing streak. They've gone through some adversity here. We don't know if Ehlers is going to be back for game 1, but we do expect him back. Earlier in the series, I think that's going to be a huge boost for the Jets. And at the end of the day, it's like Frank Saravelli said: Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, they're going to get points. But I do think, the difference for me in the series is going to be Connor Hellebuck. I think he's going to steal some games, and I think, it might be as early as Wednesday night game 1. So, again, it might not be a popular pick, but I'm taking Jets in 6.
Well, hang on. Jeff Merrick of Sportsnet, Jets in 6, and former Toronto Maple Leafs general manager Gord Stellick, Jets in 6. So you're not completely on an island so far when it comes to those predictions. Mr. Minuk, let me hear what you have to say.
Well, I'm also going with the Jets because I actually, again, like I said, I think it's a toss-up. I think that the Oilers are a little inflated right now. I think that they've been playing well, but again, like I said, Mike Smith's been fantastic. If you find a chink in that armor, if you find a little crack in the wall, that could be something that you can exploit and widen. So if the Jets are able to do that, if they're able to, again, with some of the firepower that they have at their disposal. And obviously, Nikolai Ehlers is a big factor, and that's a big if as to what's going to happen with game 1, maybe game 2, regardless of when he's ready to return. I think it'll be an interesting situation, but I'm actually going with the Jets in 7.
Jets in 7. So let me look.
Hashtag bold.
Here's who else chose the Jets in 7, courtesy of our friends at Sportsnet. Nick Alberga has the Jets in 7. Justin Bourne has the Jets in 7. And Dave, you're in some elite company. None other than Kenny himself, Ken Wiebe, has the Jets in 7 as well. So there you go. You got
what about Rennie? What did Rennie go with?
for whatever reason, and we'll obviously have to find out more about this. Maybe we'll have to text them as in Ezzy's role as an insider. Rennie wasn't asked for his predictions, so you might have to stay tuned. I think I saw that later on this week, maybe I think they're trying for maybe Tuesday. Kenny and Rennie are going to do their own playoff preview show, so we'll have to see what Kenny or what Rennie has to say there when it comes to predictions. Sean Reynolds being Rennie, of course. You can keep giving us your predictions in the chat right now, so keep sending those in. How you think the Jets and the Oilers series is going to go. I hate to be the party pooper or the rain on the parade. I've watched the Jets for the majority of the year. I've watched the Oilers for a lot this year. I do think that the Oilers are just a little bit better than the Winnipeg Jets, and I'm going to go with Oilers in 7. It's going to be close. It's not going to be one-sided. It's not going to be it's not going to be the Jets team that we've seen, lose 7 games in a row recently. I do believe, though, that the Oilers are going to end up persevering, and it's going to be Oilers in 7. Time will tell. It starts Wednesday night. The Illegal Curve post-game show, Wednesday night. Assuming there's no overtime, post-game will probably start right around 10:40, give or take a couple minutes there. We'll have we're all there for you. We're going to be tuned on our Twitter feed throughout the course of the game, and then when the game ends, come back here and we're going to talk about everything that happened. It'll probably be even an extended version of the Illegal Curve post-game show, given that it's going to be playoff time and the games matter that much more. And if we could do an hour and 10 minutes after last night's Leafs Jets game that didn't mean anything, and granted, a lot of that time was spent on Ezzy's poster of Anna Kournikova in his room when he was a teenager. We'll talk more about hockey and less about Ezzy's weird posters up in his bedroom when he was an impressionable youth.
That's not weird. I had a huge crush on Anna Kournikova.
Yeah,
I just can't believe that you didn't know that you guys didn't know he was married. She was married to Enrique Iglesias. Like, do you guys not watch TMZ?
I'm just shocked Ezzy didn't drop a Samantha Fox reference.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I don't know what that means either.
Well, so you guys missed that. I guarantee there's gonna be some people in the chat who are gonna know that reference.
Samantha Fox?
Yeah, she was like literally the poster child. Like that was the poster.
I thought you said smack the fox.
Well, that too. I mean, I would do that, but that PETA would get upset.
Yeah, I think smacking the fox is what you did when you were looking at your Anna Kournikova.
All right. Moving along.
This is a family program.
Yeah,
my kids watch the show.
Yeah,
your kids shouldn't know what that means, and that's fine. Let's talk about the Leafs and the Habs series. We're going to go through the rest of the playoff series over the next few minutes, give our predictions and everything else. Joe from Winnipeg knew who Samantha Fox was, Dave.
Yeah,
so you're in good company. But you're elderly.
And Google her now.
Yeah. Oh boy.
The Leafs and the Habs. So the Leafs obviously are the better team on paper. They've been the better team all season long. They dominated the Montreal Canadiens this year for the most part during their head-to-head matchups. But this Montreal Canadiens team might be getting healthy at the same time, or at the right time, pardon me. They need to get Carey Price back in net. They need to get Shea Weber, and obviously we're going to see if we can get an update on his health. Brendan Gallagher coming back. Philip Deneau I saw was practicing. So is this series between the Leafs and the Habs closer than it looks like on paper? The Leafs went 7-2-1 against the Canadiens this year, almost as one-sided as the Oilers record against the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, it's a really good comparison, right? Like the Oilers and the Leafs are probably both really happy with the first round matchups they got. But you mentioned some of the injured players. Like it's been reported by Stu Cowan. I saw in Montreal Gazette, Brendan Gallagher and Carey Price are both going to be healthy. The expectation Shea Weber is going to be back. Obviously, guys, Jonathan Drouin for personal reasons isn't going to be available for the Habs, but I do think it's closer. Like, I'll wait to give my prediction here, but I still think this. If Brendan Gallagher wasn't good to go, I don't know if I would think that Habs would be competitive in this series. And, I don't think Carey Price is going to have as big of an impact as Gallagher. And I wouldn't be surprised, guys, if Price gets lit up by the Leafs if you don't see Jake Allen go in, because we know Jake Allen has played the majority of the games in net for the Habs this year. So Gallagher is the key one for me. Obviously, Weber is a top 4 defenseman for them. But we talked about this all year long, when we were looking at the Jets and the Habs when they were playing in their games. And, this Habs group of defensemen is really good, right? Like they brought in Joel Edmondson to a group that's already very solid with, we mentioned Weber, Ben Sherratt, who am I forgetting here? Brett Kulak is a very underrated defenseman. Romanov is a rookie defenseman for them. So I really like their group of defensemen, and they've got some balanced scoring. Like, let's not forget Tyler Toffoli has been a really good player for them this year. And, we know Gallagher, Deneau, like these are talented players, and they brought in Corey Perry to kind of be that veteran presence on the fourth line. So I do think that the Habs are going to put up a fight here, but let's not forget that, this is a dream team here for the Leafs. Like, Frank Saravelli mentioned it. Like, you brought in Nick Foligno, you brought in David Riddick. Like, this was already, one of the best teams in the NHL. Like, let's not just say it's the best team in the North Division. Like, they're absolutely stacked. Matthews had a career year. Marner, John Tavares was on an absolute heater, guys, to end the regular season. Not so much yesterday versus the Jets. So, yeah, the Habs are going to have to find an answer to shut down that high-powered Leaf offense. But I do think, the Habs are going to win some games. I still like the Leafs in the series, but I don't think it's going to be a sweep. Put it that way, Drew.
Dave, your thoughts and your analysis on this Leafs Habs series. Is this
just because I said that it's going to be a sweep, by the way?
For the Habs are going to sweep the Leafs instead.
Put the Ginsburg on them.
Yeah. Is this the year that the Leafs are able to, overcome their bugaboo being a playoff series? Winning a playoff round has been something that they haven't been able to accomplish despite having a fair bit of regular season success as of late. We remember what happened in the bubble last summer. They flamed out against a Columbus Blue Jackets team. How do the Leafs prevent that from happening again? And how do the Habs sort of overcome what looks like a fairly one-sided disadvantage that they hold against Toronto?
Well, I mean, I think health is a big factor, and we talked about that for the last couple of days prior to when we were detailing all the injuries the Jets were dealing with. We were saying, well, how much worse is it for Montreal? Because they had a number of guys. They had a number more than the Jets had in terms of guys who were dealing with injury. But as you just reported, if you've got Carey Price healthy, if you've got Brendan Gallagher available, if you potentially have Shea Weber, that definitely impacts your team and it makes it a better team. Now, I personally think this Leafs team is built for success, and I think they've created a structure within this team to have both talent and a little grit, and they've got some playoff experience and guys who have been able to go far in the playoffs or been role players. They're not the team that's going to be fragile. I think that's the key for this Leafs team is. And again, the big question is goaltending. Is Campbell going to be good enough? Are they going to go with Anderson? I mean, we saw what the Manitoba Moose did against Frederik Anderson, and so are they going to trust him, or are they going to allow Campbell to have the net? Again, that to me is probably the biggest Achilles heel for this Toronto team, not Toronto's team, but I think although I suspect that they wouldn't mind having a second team in Toronto, but again, I think that's probably going to be the biggest question mark for them. And again, will Carey Price be healthy and ready to go? And could he be Carey Price that we've seen previously? That could be an X factor for me as well. However, having said that, I think Montreal is going to have some success because I think they're going to play Toronto physically, and that's probably the writing on the wall when you're playing against this Leafs team. But again, like I said, when you've got a guy like Foligno, when you've got Thornton, you've got Simmons, they've got some guys who can handle the physical play. So it's not as big an element, I think, as it was in previous years. But again, like I said, I still think Toronto, despite their deficiencies in net, potentially, and again, like I said, Campbell's been excellent, so I don't want to malign him. But again, in terms of what he should be able to do in the playoffs, which we've talked about as being a different animal, I ultimately think Toronto's going to win this in 6.
Yeah, and there's no doubt Campbell's going to start game 1, Dave. Like Freddie Anderson is the backup. He got one game in at the end of the regular season, but he was struggling with the Marlies when they played the Moose, right? So right. I think it's not a question of who's going to start for the Leafs. I think it's a question of if Campbell struggles, can Freddie Anderson come in and give them the type of goaltending that he's given them in the past? Because let's be honest, this injury has really thrown his season off, right? And it's tough when you get injured at that point in the season, and then you have a goaltender who was already kind of establishing himself as the new number 1 goaltender, and he's a pending UFA, right? So that is the big question mark for the Leafs. The only question mark. Like, you look at their defense, and Bogo's injured right now, but TJ Brody, Morgan Riley, Justin Hull, Jake Muzzin, Travis Dermott, like, they're really solid on defense. Ben Hutton was the other guy that's their 6th defenseman right now with Bogo out. And then obviously you've got Rasmus Sundin in there, right? But just look at the third line: Pierre Engvall, Ilya Mikheyev. They're not going to have Zach Hyman. I don't know if they're going to get him back at all during the series, but they're not going to have him early in the series, that's for sure. So that's the only significant injury they have right now, but they're really deep. So I agree with you, Dave. Like, this is Canada's team right now. They're a heavier favorite, I would say, than the Oilers are. But I think, the Leafs are going to make it interesting. I'm going to give you your prediction right now, Drew. I'm going to say Leafs in 6.
Leafs in 6, and I believe, Dave, you also said Leafs in 6, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, correct.
There you go. So both of you on the Leafs. Worth interesting to note, looking at, again, just because I just have it handy, all the Sportsnet predictors, and I think there's about 20 of them. Not a single one has chosen the Montreal Canadiens to defeat the Toronto Maple Leafs. So if the Habs want to play up the "nobody believes in us" card, they can certainly have a lot of evidence to that effect. And you know what, I don't. The people who say that they hate the Habs, I don't really quite understand that. If I had to choose,
hates the Habs?
Yeah, I don't hate the Habs. I mean, I can't quite understand that.
Well, you shouldn't hate anybody. Life's too short to hate anybody.
You know what I mean? But in terms of, teams that I don't mind watching flame out, for mass entertainment, for my own personal schadenfreude, the Leafs certainly would be at the top of that list. And, who knows what'll happen. But of course, the Montreal Canadiens, that's why they play the games, as the old cliche goes.
It kind of scares me. I was just going to say, Drew, it kind of scares me. I can't speak for you guys, but when you don't see a single person picking the Habs, it makes me think that maybe the Habs can win this series, right? Because even though Carey Price is, let's be honest, he's towards the end of his career. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. There's no doubt in anybody's mind. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, but he's not the same price of 5 or 6 years ago, right? Like, he's not able to make 35 to 40 saves and steal a game. He maybe can do it one game. I should say, I don't think he can do it in a series.
Nobody thought they were going to beat the Penguins last year in the bubble. And you remember that the Habs really handled the Penguins quite easily. Now, the Penguins didn't look right at all during the bubble. And I think the bubble was such
a defense was atrocious.
Yeah, and the bubble was such an anomaly, I think, that you really can't necessarily extrapolate anything from it, especially because it was, so many games ago. But, for the Habs, I think that they have to look at that and say, look, nobody gave us a shot there, and we took care of Pittsburgh in the first round, if I recall correctly, in 4 games, something along those lines. So, again.
Sorry, Drew. I was just going to say, just so Ty knows, Eddie's birthday is July 24th. So you've got some time before you have to get him that poster.
Same day as the NHL draft.
And I look forward to hopefully you can present it to him at the same time his wife is there, just so I can see that reaction, because I think that would be
he's going to open it up when we're doing our Illegal Curve first round show. What are you talking about?
Oh, okay. Is that how it's going to work? Okay,
I always say I have the same birthday as Jennifer Lopez. I have the same birthday as Barry Bonds. I have the same birthday as Patrice Bergeron, and I have the exact same birthday, including the year, as Anna Paquin, famous Winnipeg actress.
Ezzy, you're thinking about it in the wrong way. You got to think about it that they have the same birthday as you, not the other way around.
Right.
Come on.
That's how I think about it with Mr. 8787, Mr. Sidney Crosby. We share the same birthday, but I know that he's, when he goes home to Cole Harbor or whatever in the off season.
You think he tells people off?
What did you say, Dave?
I have the same birthday as Mindell.
Do you think he tells people, I have the same birthday as Drew Mindell?
There's no question about it in my mind. Prove me wrong. That's what I would say to you. Prove me wrong. Saturday morning, we're live here with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. This segment brought to you by...
Shame on me. Fool you twice. Shame on me.
I've never done this before, but I'm looking at some of the people born on September 15th, my birthday. Prince Harry, Tommy Lee Jones, big fan of his.
I always forget your birthday, Dave. It's like 15th, 16th, 14th.
No, I'm a 15th. Come on.
It's actually only one day. You just can't remember the one day. That's, it doesn't change. It just is the same day every year. You just have to bother to learn it.
No, it changes in leap years.
Sorry, we do have someone who's really famous.
No, Ezzy, his birthday doesn't change on a leap year.
It was a joke.
By the way,
you're like Naomi. Like, I try to be like overtly sarcastic with her, and she takes me serious. I'm like, how could you take that seriously? And then I remember who she's talking to.
Yeah,
got some other good ones here. Marco Polo. Marco Polo. Yeah, he was born in September 15th, 1254. It's pretty impressive.
What about Ralph Lauren?
Nope. Gaylord Perry, baseball player. Dan Marino.
You guys didn't get that joke. Marco Polo, Ralph Lauren.
Oh, sorry. I missed on it. I was just right over my head. Heidi Pratt. Hello Hills. Is that tonight?
And apparently our buddy from the Netherlands, Rowdy the Dutch Jets fan. You and him.
Rowdy and I have the same birthday. That's amazing.
There you go.
Hi, Rowdy.
This show is yeah, we thought yesterday's post-game show went off the rails. This one has certainly taken a sharp left turn. I was saying this segment brought to you by Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty, official realtors of Illegal Curve Hockey. When 95% of your clients come via referral, it shows your commitment to honesty, integrity, and a total dedication to client satisfaction. If you want to sell your home for more and less time, come shake hands with Frank and Mauro Zappia online at zappiagroup.com. Somebody in Matthew Thompson, check today because it's Ken Weeb's birthday, which is that's very funny, Matthew, because the running joke, of course, being that every day.
Fool us once.
Yes, every day is Ken Weep's birthday, no matter what day of the week it is, no matter what day of the year it is. Every day is Ken's birthday. Let's shift our focus.
No, I want to do one quick interjection. There was a really funny comment by Josh Morrissey in the availability yesterday. He was doing an interview, and Ken asked a question, and he's talking about Ken's tan and how Ken had been golfing a lot. It was so funny. Threw Kenny off, and then the best was like, I tweeted the line out, and Ken DM'd me. He's like, I didn't golf, and I'm like, Ken, I know you didn't golf, but he's very sensitive. So he's only golfed one time. For people thinking that the Manitoba Golf Tour is well underway.
No, it's
so
delayed.
Dave, are you saying that Weber slid into your DMs?
He did slide into my DMs. Correct.
Yes. Anyways, let's talk about the Western Division first round series. You have, the Vegas Golden Knights. They get the St. Louis Blues the Vegas Golden Knights get the Minnesota Wild in the first round. And the Colorado Avalanche get the St. Louis Blues. Avalanche were 5-3-0 against the Blues this season, and the Minnesota Wild were actually quite good against the Vegas Golden Knights, 5-1-2 against the Golden Knights. At one point in time, they won 5 straight. So this Wild team has been sort of the surprise team in the NHL, I think, all season long from my perspective. Maybe they were going to be a fringe playoff team, but they've definitely exceeded my expectations, and it's going to be 2 very interesting series in the Western Division starting, I don't even know when those playoff series start, to be perfectly honest. I think Monday, if I'm not mistaken, for those ones.
And you're right to be confused, Drew, with the matchups, because Vegas and Colorado it was the last game of the year. Colorado had to beat LA twice to not only claim the West Division title, but they won the President's Trophy, right? Because Vegas and Colorado had the same amount of points, 82 if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, you're right. Minnesota has had a lot of success against Vegas, and yeah, there was a surprise because in that division you kind of just you penciled in Vegas and Colorado, and then you expected, St. Louis most likely to take one of those playoff spots. But, and it's not just, Kirill Kaprizov. Like, he's obviously, a guy that has really made them a much more dangerous offensive team. But, you've had a really good season from Joel Eriksson-Ek, a first rounder who, he took a little bit of time. They had him as a third line center, and he's had a career year. And when you look at that defense, I mean, the issues in Minnesota have never been around their D group. I mean, we know with Ryan Suter, Jonas Brodin, Matt Dumba, the names go on and on. Like that's a really solid defensive team. And yeah, the thing with Vegas is similar to Edmonton. They don't have as much depth once you go through the roster, right? Like when the Jets played Vegas back in 2018 and lost in the West Final, the top line was Jonathan Marchessault, Riley Smith, William Karlsson. That's not your top line anymore. Chandler Stevenson is centering Mark Stone and Max Pacioretty. It's been one of the best lines in the league all year long. If Minnesota can shut down that line, Dave, then it's going to go a long way in beating the Golden Knights. The huge advantage for me is the Golden Knights in net. Like Marc-Andre Fleury at 36 years old, he could win the Vezina. I mean, it could go to Andre Vasilevsky as well, but just look at Fleury's numbers. Like, they're incredible. And if Fleury does struggle
on the Jennings Trophy this year, the Golden Knights did.
Yeah, there you go. So if Fleury struggles, like, you've got 2 number 1 goaltenders. There aren't that many teams in the NHL that can say that. Like, they're not 1A, 1B. They're both 1A, right? So that's the big advantage for the Golden Knights here. But yeah, I think this is going to be a very close series, a very intriguing series. And I think, the Wild maybe aren't giving enough credit outside of Minnesota for how deep of a team they are. Like, it's not just 1 or 2 players. Like, Matt Zuccarello's had a good season. And I think Dean Evison deserves a lot of credit. He's a really good coach, and he's got a lot out of that group. So I think this is going to be a longer series.
Well, and Izzy, it's funny because if you remember when we had Mike McKenna on who covers Vegas, obviously former goaltender, he talked about that. He said that the one team that's probably a team that they don't want to face is Minnesota, because they seem to have had their number all season long. So I actually expect it to be a pretty good series. I think Minnesota is almost like found money right now. You're getting such a good and experienced run for, I mean, obviously you've got some veteran guys on this team, but you're getting a lot of guys who, are getting their first taste of playoff hockey. That's a good thing for the Jets' former Central Division rival. I don't even know what division they're in anymore, but whatever those divisions down south are called, the fact is it's a good opportunity for them, because again, they're young and dumb, not all of them obviously, and they've been told all year long that they weren't supposed to do this, and they've been able to consistently do it. So I mean, I would expect Vegas to win this series. I think Vegas is actually going to win it in 5, but I still think Minnesota is going to give them a fight.
Ezzy, give me your prediction.
As you're muted.
I think as
you're muted.
You're still muted.
I hear you guys.
The funniest part is Ezzy mutes himself. It's not like we're not muting Ezzy. Ezzy mutes himself.
Well, the reason why I mute myself is so you don't hear my heavy breathing, and you don't hear me. I've got a bit of a nasal thing going because I was raking the leaves yesterday and I had an allergic reaction. So I'm taking the Golden Knights as well. The line that
an allergic
I mentioned,
reaction to leaves or an allergic reaction to work?
Well, yeah, it's funny. No, I took a vacation day yesterday for Hockey Manitoba, and I was doing some light gardening in the backyard. But it was more so, I think, just from the dust, and I have those 2 big trees in my backyard. So it was needles and all that stuff. You guys know what it's like with spring allergies. But sorry, I was just going to mention the line I was talking about earlier on the Wild. Jordan Greenway, Kevin Fiala was Marcus Foligno, Joel Eriksson-Ek, and Jordan Greenway. Is that line that I was trying to reference for Minnesota. And I think that's going to be a factor there. And I'm going to go with Golden Knights in 6. I don't think it's going to be maybe as short as Dave thinks. I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, Golden Knights are a really good team, but to me, it's kind of, the Golden Knights are one of those rare teams that are one of the best goal-scoring teams in the league, and they're one of the best defensive teams in the league. They're a really good possession team, but as we talked about, the Wild had some success during the regular season. So still taking Vegas, but I think Minnesota is going to make it tough on them.
There you go. Those are the predictions so far. What about between the Avalanche and the St. Louis Blues? I mean, this certainly looks like it should be a one-sided series, but Ryan O'Reilly, certainly not shy about giving some bulletin board material. Here's the quote that from Ryan O'Reilly, St. Louis Blues captain: "When we're skating and we're physical, I think we give them a lot of issues, whether that's forechecking or defending. When we play our heavy game and commit to it and put pucks in and don't feed their rush, we make it tough on them and find ways to beat them. That's what we've got to do. That's got to be our focus. We know they have a lot of talent over there. They work hard, but for us, it's an exciting challenge. We're going to have some fun, and we are going to beat them." St. Louis Blues captain Ryan O'Reilly. Is he right? Are they going to beat them? Or is he just saying what needs to be said in the dressing room?
They might beat them, but I'm not taking the Blues. And if there's one guy that can say that, it's Ryan O'Reilly. He happens to have a Stanley Cup ring and a Conn Smythe trophy, right? So when he says that, it's not like some run-of-the-mill player. And I appreciate that confidence. I'm a huge fan of O'Reilly, as you guys know. But, I mean, look, Colorado finished the season winning 5 games in a row. We talked about it. They're the President's Trophy champion. I just think they're too much offensively for St. Louis to handle. Like, yeah, St. Louis is a good defensive team, but and they're relatively healthy as well, right? So with Nathan McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen, Gabe Landeskog, it goes on, and also what they have going is a very activated and offensive-minded defense, right? Like we know how good Cale Makar is, Samuel Girard. I think the addition of Devon Taves was just a perfect complement in their top 4. So and really solid in net with Grubauer. So I just don't see any weaknesses in this team, right? Like we could go up and down their roster, Dave. Nazem Kadri, Andre Burakovsky, Brandon Saad. It's just a very deep. There's a reason why they were the top team in the NHL. So I'm going to go Avalanche in 6. I almost want to go Avalanche in 5. The Blues are a solid hockey team, but I just think this Avalanche team right now has to be a Stanley Cup favorite.
Yeah,
Dave?
I mean, it's hard to argue with what Ezzy just said. He went through that and he explained what the disparities are between these two squads. And again, I like the additions that Joe Sakic has made. He's shown that he's a more than capable GM in Colorado. The things that he's managed to do and do it all under the salary cap have been impressive. So I like what Colorado's done. And again, what was the big concern with Colorado last year was their goaltending. But if their goaltending is solid, then then that's a team that's to be feared. And you don't win. They didn't win the way, like, I think that they've learned lessons. I think incrementally they've managed this group because they've kept them largely intact, have learned together. And I think through those shared experiences, you're going to see a collective will to win on this Avalanche team. So I agree with you, Razzie. I think O'Reilly said what he had to say, and I don't dispute his belief in his team, but I don't think this Blues team is what they were before. And I anticipate that you're going to have a Colorado team that's going to take it in 6.
And, I just wanted to throw this in as well, Drew, just before we move on. Like, Devin Dubnyk is backing Philip Grubauer up, right? Like, they're all in. And I think you go back to last year, the Avalanche could have easily gone to the Stanley Cup final and maybe even won it. What was the issue? They ran into the injuries, remember? Like, with Pavel Francouz, who was a capable backup for Grubauer, but then they were down to Michael Hutchinson. And we got to give Hutch credit here. Like, he won some games for the Avalanche, but it was just too little too late. So you've got Devin Dubnyk, right, a former Vezina finalist. And if Grubauer does go down, I think now you've got a better option, even though Francouz was a good goalie. So I think that's something to throw out. Like, the Avalanche are just deep in all areas. They really don't have that many weaknesses.
When we come back, we'll shift our focus to the Eastern Conference, that being the East Division and the Central Division. Much more to come. We're talking predictions. We're talking the Stanley Cup Playoffs. You're listening, you're watching, you're chatting with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
While you can't always count on your team winning, nor your favorite player scoring, one thing you can always count on is Bernstein's Deli. They've expanded their services because the team at Bernstein's Deli wants to accommodate your needs and keep you safe. Open Tuesday to Saturday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. to serve you. Head to your phone, in-store or online to shop for groceries or order meals from the restaurant, like the legendary Illegal Curve Sandwich. Just go to bernsteinsdeli.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal. Starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
We're back Saturday morning. This is the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms. This segment brought to you by our good friends at Bernstein's Deli, official deli of Illegal Curve Hockey and home of the Illegal Curve Sandwich, located in the Corden Village Mall. Bernstein's Deli has been Winnipeg's deli destination for over 30 years. For more information, find them on Facebook or at bernsteinsdeli.com. Our friends at Bernstein's undergoing some renovations to the restaurant right now. So unfortunately, unless you're going to make an Illegal Curve sandwich at home, a do-it-yourself Illegal Curve sandwich, it's temporarily unavailable, but it'll soon be available and back to being better than ever. But Bernstein's Deli is still there to make all your other sandwiches and salads and all your sort of quote-unquote cold food available for you as they're undergoing some renovations at
What's
the
salad?
What's salad? You don't have salad, kids, like in the Boston Pizza commercial that we just played?
You don't make friends with salad, Drew.
Well, you never know. A good quality salad is a delicious thing to eat, Mr. Ginsburg. You might want to look into that. I'm just saying. Anyways, let's shift our focus to the East Division. You got two very interesting series. It gets underway tonight with the Washington Capitals and the Boston Bruins, the Zdeno Chara series, of course, where Chara looking for, I guess, quote-unquote, revenge against his former franchise. I don't know how much revenge there truly is going to be there.
And also, Chara's the nicest guy. I don't think he's thinking about revenge.
And you have the Penguins and the Islanders. The Penguins 6-2 this year against the Islanders. So sort of a one-sided Pittsburgh Penguins, team against the Islanders. And the Penguins to me are a team that nobody's talking about. They win the East Division, which is impressive because that's certainly not an easy division to win. They do it
the best division in this season. Right. I would argue.
They do it without Evgeny Malkin for the vast majority of the year. And this Penguins team is very much flying under the radar when it comes to those teams.
By the way, Malkin, our good friend Seth Rohrbaugh just said Malkin is a game-time decision for the game.
There you go. So, the Penguins to me are very much flying under the radar of those teams that are being discussed as potential Stanley Cup champions, despite the fact that they won their division.
Yeah, I agree with you, Drew. And I think part of the reason is 2 years ago, they were swept by the Islanders. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of the reasons why they're being underrated or they're flying under the radar, because the Penguins, since they've won those 2 Stanley Cups, have been one and done. Right. So I'm really looking forward. First of all, I'm looking forward to Bruins Capitals tonight just because it's the start of the playoffs. But I'm really looking forward to this Penguins Islanders series. Right. Like, I feel like both of these teams are somewhat disrespected in that they're not really considered the favorites, right? Like, I think a lot of people still think the Lightning are the favorite to come out of the, I guess, I don't know if they're even in the East anymore. I guess they're more in the West, right? In the Central Division.
Who knows?
Or I don't know. Is there an East and West? Like, I don't even
It's all getting reseeded for the Final Four. The Final Four will be the best team against the lowest team.
Exactly.
And then second against third, regardless of what division they're playing.
Exactly. Yeah, so I mean, I still think that the Islanders and the Penguins could go deep. I don't know if that necessarily means Stanley Cup final, but I could easily see them going to the conference final. And you're right, Drew. And we talked about this a little while back. Like, the biggest difference to me in the Penguins and why I think they're going to beat the Islanders is because of their defense and the improved defense. Like, Mike Matheson, even though you don't think Mike Matheson is this like offensive juggernaut, like, he's been a real improvement. You think back to the past few years, like Jack Johnson, he was a liability on the back end. So to me, like, Mike Matheson is a huge upgrade. And I've liked Cody Cece's game this year, and I do think that having Malkin back, whether that's the first game, we expect him, if it's not the first game, that it's going to be earlier in the series. Like, that's going to be a huge boost. Like, in a year in which Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews did what they did, like, Sidney Crosby was still over a point a game player, right? And like, you just expect that.
We take him for granted at this point in his career.
Absolutely. But, like, Crosby had the same amount of goals as Alex Ovechkin this year with 24. Jake Gensel had 23 goals, right? Like, Kasperi Kapanen is a guy that wasn't talked a lot about, but, he's been really good and kind of given them a little bit more skill in their top 9. So top 6, actually. So, I think the Penguins, are a contender again. And, we know that, the goaltending has been much better than it was last year. And, let's be honest, Tristan Jarry, it's tough to live up to what Matt Murray did earlier in his career, right? Winning the 2 Stanley Cups. So I like the Penguins, but I do think this one's going to go to 7 games. And I could easily see the Islanders winning this series again because they're a very deep team too. But this one is going to be like, I feel like this one is going to have 3 or 4 overtimes. Like, the Penguins and Islanders have played many times before in the playoffs, and they seem to always bring out the best in each other, Dave.
You may as well be asking me about AK bars versus Dynamo Mints for my level of understanding in terms of what's going on in these series. I mean, there's a bit more, I guess, insight simply because we watch. I'll occasionally see some of the games out west, but the games in the East. I mean, good night, Irene. I generally can't claim to have any tremendous knowledge as to what's going on with those guys, but. Look, you kind of go with a hot hand, and to me, the Penguins have been on fire. They're 8-2-0 in their last 10 games. So, and they have that a little bit of that swagger right now. And to your point, I think it was Drew who said this. They're teams that are kind of being disrespected, right? They're teams that are not really being very well regarded by anybody outside of those respective cities. I love Barry Trotz. I think Barry Trotz is an excellent coach. I think he's shown how capable he is, how good he is at squeezing water out of a rock oftentimes. But you gotta. This is going to be a tough one. I think it's going to be like a 7-game series between those two. I'd probably give maybe the edge to the Penguins just because of that experience, especially if Malkin is, depending obviously on his status, because like I said, Seth just said he was a game-time decision for tomorrow. But to me, if you can get Malkin, if you got Crosby the way you've got those other role players. So I could see that being a Penguins in 7.
The other, and I was going to quickly I was going to throw in, Drew. Sorry, like Jeff Carter is playing up the middle on the third line for them. That was one of those kind of surprise trade deadline acquisitions, right? Like everyone was kind of thinking Carter was just going to finish his career in LA, right? Like he wasn't somebody. I don't think he was on the trade bait board.
Well, the big thing with Carter was he was always almost threatening to retire if he got traded because he always wanted to finish his career in LA. And you're right, it was totally under the radar. They got Carter, and then he had like 4 goals in like he's been very good for LA. I mean, he had 4
goals against the Buffalo Sabres, but I think Dave, you would have had 4 goals against the Sabres if you were competing against them. No, I'm joking, but Carter and Crosby obviously have the friendship. That was one of the reasons he admitted why he decided to I don't know if he had to waive a no move clause, but he agreed to the trade. Let's put it that way. So Carter's going to be a factor as well. But the Islanders are very deep, right? Like I think we would all agree the Islanders are one of the hardest teams to play against. Defensively, they don't give you a lot. They're really strong in net. So it's not going to be an easy series for them. And this one to me is almost a coin flip. Like I almost kind of I was going towards the Islanders, but I do think Pittsburgh offensively, that's where I kind of give them the edge.
Well, speaking of the Buffalo Sabres, Taylor Hall looks like he's been hooked up to the rejuvenation machine, leaving the trash fire that is the Buffalo Sabres organization and arriving in Boston. And doesn't that just look like a seamless fit right now? And the depth that he adds to the Boston Bruins as they face off against the Washington Capitals in the first round. And this is a Capitals team that's got a little bit of upheaval around them. You hear about Evgeny Kuznetsov, for the second time this year, sort of getting into trouble with, breaking some rules. I don't know if this was specifically COVID protocol related, but it sounds like he was late to a team meeting, and as a result, he was sat down for a game or two. Just things don't seem to be hunky-dory in Washington, whereas Boston right now is firing on all cylinders. And, I trust Tuukka Rask as the goaltender to be the best goaltender in that series, given that, Washington has got 2 sort of inexperienced goaltenders trying to lead them through the first round in a very dangerous Boston Bruins team.
Yeah, well, first of all, Ilya Samsonov is also on that COVID protocol list. So I don't think they've announced it formally, but Vitek Vanacek, who's been pretty good for them, he hasn't just been pretty good. He's been good for them. He's going to get the start in game 1. And you mentioned
no playoff experience, though.
No, he doesn't have any playoff experience. Ilya Samsonov doesn't either. So
that's my point.
But that's Jeremy Swayman is a guy we got to talk about here. I don't know if you guys have been following what's happening with him. Alaska product. He has stolen the backup job from Yaroslav Halak. Tuukka Rask has been very solid, but obviously, he's had some injuries this year. But Swayman is a guy that I think is going to be very interesting to watch. Like, to me, this is going to be a fascinating series for so many reasons. Like, Brad Marchand is one of the best playoff performers in the history of the game, and he always elevates his game. Boston, I think they've won, if I'm not mistaken, 4 or 5 of the games against Washington. It's been a little bit more even than some of the other series we've talked about. But that perfection line is still the one of the best lines, if not the best line, with Pasternak and Patrice Bergeron. And, you mentioned Taylor Hall. And he's been really solid on that second line, right? David Krejci, Craig Smith are the other guys on that second line. And, even though the Bruins don't have Torrey Krug anymore, they don't have Zdeno Chara, and that's obviously a storyline for the Capitals in that, Chara might, reveal some secrets on the Bruins because nobody knows that team better. I don't know, if that's necessarily going to be a huge factor, Dave, but
they've played each other 8 times. I don't think there's any secrets to be told
exactly
at this point.
Yeah, I think they both know that they're facing a really good team. But so I give the advantage to the Bruins in net big time. Just look at Swayman. I think his save percentage is .945. Like, it's been an incredible story. If he played, maybe 10 more games, he'd probably be in the rookie of the year conversation. But, I still think this Bruins defense is pretty good. Matt Grzelcyk is a very underrated defenseman, paired up with Charlie McAvoy, or he has been paired up with Charlie McAvoy a lot this year. And then bringing in a guy like Mike Riley, I thought Dave was really a good, solid depth acquisition. We thought, when we were previewing the trade deadline, the Jets might be in on Mike Riley. So yeah, I mean, this Bruins team maybe isn't as big of a juggernaut as they were a couple of years ago when they went to the Stanley Cup final. But I still like the Bruins going into the series, because if you don't have Kuznetsov, that's your top line center. I don't think you have much chance, especially if that perfection line is producing like we know they can.
I would agree with you there, Dave. Your thoughts?
Well, I was going to say just quickly that the Washington has outscored Boston significantly, but what tends to win in the playoffs is good defense, and Boston has allowed, after the Islanders, significantly fewer goals than Washington. 136 goals they've given up versus Washington's 163. Boston's goal differential is plus 32. I think that ultimately defense is going to be what does it for the Bruins. So I would give the edge to the Bruins. I think the Bruins are going to win in 6.
There you go. Let's move on to the Central Division playoff series. These are our final 2 series to chat about on this morning's edition of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. This is probably the most one-sided on paper of the series in the playoffs, certainly in the American divisions. The Carolina Hurricanes and the Nashville Predators. The Hurricanes 6-2 on the year against Nashville. The Preds 2-5-1. It should be Carolina relatively handily, but of course that's why they, as the cliche goes, play the games. And in the series that we talked about with Frank Saravelli about an hour or so ago, Florida against Tampa Bay. Florida been the better of the 2 teams in that series this season. The Panthers 5-2-1 against the Lightning. The Lightning 3-5 when you factor in overtime and shootouts and all that jazz. So 2 very interesting series. That Panthers Lightning one, to me, as we said with Frank, is one of the most interesting series I think in all of these playoffs this season.
Yeah, because you've got the defending Stanley Cup champs against a team that had, fairly low expectations and were challenging for the President's Trophy, right? Like I think the Panthers were only 4 points back of the Avalanche. So yeah, I think this is going to be an absolute slobber knocker between the Panthers and Lightning. And, it's a great story because, the Panthers, were always that team that you're expecting to take the next step. And it starts with Alexander Barkov and Jonathan Huberdeau. Like both of these guys will be in the 2022 Olympics. Obviously Barkov for Finland, Huberdeau for Canada. But, it's a very deep team. And it seemed like all of the moves they made this year, guys, were the right ones, right? Like Patrick Hornquist, has really worked out nicely there. Radko Gudas on the back end. They bring in Sam Bennett. He seems rejuvenated after coming over from Calgary. So I think it's going to absolutely be a very close series. It's going to be, I think, a high-scoring series. I think you're going to see some overtime games. And you mentioned Panthers were really good against the Lightning during the regular season. It's tough for me to really bet against or pick against the Lightning, but there is something about this Panthers team that I think is special. I think they've been, that team that has played with house money all year long, and they've played that underdog role. This is a tough one. We'll have to come back to me on this one, but the Hurricanes and Predators, that series to me is as one-sided as it gets here. Like the Hurricanes are absolutely a Stanley Cup contender. And I think, the only way to me, Dave, for the Predators to win, UC Saros has had a very underrated year. He's been fantastic in net for the Predators, and we know that they're a great defensive team. Obviously, Jets fans were hoping, the team could pry Matthias Ekholm out of there. But, led by Roman Josi, still top 3, top 5 defensemen in the NHL. The only way you're going to beat the Hurricanes is if, you steal a couple games and Saros stands on his head, because the Hurricanes are not only a great offensive team, they're also a great defensive team. Alex Nedeljkovic has been a very interesting story there. He's given them excellent goaltending, and we're not sure if he's going to start or if it's going to be Mrazek in game 1. But that series to me, I'm going to go Hurricanes in 5. I just don't think the Predators have close to enough firepower to be able to match the Hurricanes.
David?
What can I say? As he just summed up both series so beautifully that there's really not much to add at that point, other than I can give you a prediction. But
that's fine. Give me a prediction.
I would just be redundancy at this point. My man over there, my man on the bottom of the screen, just did a beautiful job. So
but you know what I mean, though, Dave. I
agree with you.
Ryan Johansson, I mean Philip Forsberg, Calle York, they just, I don't see them going head to head. Like they're obviously going to play the Hurricanes. I just don't see them making this a long series.
No, I agree with you. I'd be inclined to think it's going to be a Hurricanes in 5 series myself, and with the Panthers one, Panthers and Lightning, I think it's going to be exciting. I think there's a novelty that I think is going to attract a lot of attention because again, this is a year in the sense that, and we've talked about it throughout the course of our shows. Everybody is sorry, I just saw someone wants to wrap up with a shot of Seagram's, but everybody is tunnel vision, right? Everybody is so focused on what's in front of them, which is whether if you're Winnipeg, it's the Winnipeg Jets, if you're in Calgary, it's the Flames, and so on and so forth. You're not really paying, and that's why I said, like, we don't really have a tremendous amount of insight because we're not watching, the Jets play the Wild, the Jets play the Blues, the Jets play the Vegas Golden Knights. So it's a different scene. It's a different, even your attention when you're watching it is not as significant as normal. So I guess this is one of those years where when there's an opportunity to draw your attention to a series that maybe you wouldn't normally give it, it will be a series like the Battle of Florida because you've got two teams, you've got such a unique story and such a unique opportunity. And again, with fans, maybe it'll make it a little more exciting. So I'm looking forward to that one. But I mean, ultimately, Drew, all I could do, I was thinking about you and I was like, wow, Nikita Kucherov miraculously back for game 1 of the playoffs. How lucky is that?
And the NHL did their very deep investigation about his health to see if there was any shenanigans with LTIR. And lo and behold, amazing, the NHL found that it was perfectly kosher. Give me a bleeping break. I can't stand it. It drives me absolutely insane.
I'm with you on this one.
Every general manager in the NHL should be screaming bloody murder, but the NHL is, see no evil, hear no evil, and it's absolutely 100% salary cap manipulation to the worst degree, and I can't believe that time and time again, they just let it happen, and every other NHL team says, oh, I'm fine with that, even though it's complete nonsense. Sorry.
How long has Kucherov been ready to go, Drew? I bet he's been ready to go for a month.
6 weeks? 6 weeks, 8 weeks?
My guess is 3 to 4 weeks. But all I knew is that all I had to do was give Drew a gentle little push, and he would just go down that hill without much resistance.
You know what?
Yeah, the puppet master Manuk.
I was having a conversation with Rennie about this. It must be a couple months ago. And he went, because I think I went on a Twitter rant or something, and he wanted to know my perspective, or he didn't sort of understand what my perspective was until we got deeper into it. I just think it's absolutely atrocious. I think it makes the NHL look like an absolute joke of a league to allow all these ridiculous salary cap manipulations and salary cap shenanigans time and time again. And they refuse to do anything about it. And I find it to be the most, as a fan, I find it to be offensive that they refuse to actually enforce a level playing field when instead all they do is just pretend like this is perfectly normal and that there's not Nikita Kucherov magically needed surgery and magically waited until the day before the season started and magically was healthy in time for the playoffs where there's no salary cap anymore. Why even have a salary cap? Exactly right, T. Konapoli in the chat. Don't have a salary cap. Have a luxury tax. Let Tampa Bay spend whatever they want.
That would go over well. Could you imagine the rate with the Rangers, Leafs? That would not be a good system. There's no.
No, it's fine. When they didn't have a salary cap, the Rangers still didn't. They spent to the moon, and they still didn't do anything successfully. You can't just spend your way to a title.
See Bobby Holik, $9 million a year.
Yeah, I mean, look, you see it in baseball. Baseball has a luxury tax, and it's not always the same teams that are necessarily the juggernauts. Granted, the Los Angeles Dodgers have been a great team as of late, but they only won one World Series. That happened last year. The New York Yankees, obviously deep-pocketed New York Yankees, don't always win. So a luxury tax,
you can't buy a championship.
You can't from a competitive balance perspective. Mm-hmm. A luxury tax is way more fair. If you're the Jets or if you're any of these teams that are trying to keep a team together, the Blackhawks, maybe say 5-10 years ago when they were trying to keep their Stanley Cup team together. You think the Blackhawks didn't want there to be a luxury tax instead of a salary cap so that they could, they drafted and developed Teuvo Teravainen, instead of having to give them away for pennies on the dollar, they could have kept them open and kept their window open. Instead, because there's a salary cap and they misallocated their resources on a guy like Brent Seabrook, who obviously, his career quickly fell off a ledge, or the Jets with Blake Wheeler, when who knows what he's going to look like in a couple of years. Put in a luxury tax instead of a salary cap. It's ridiculous. Exactly. NBA has a salary cap where they have penalties if you go over a certain amount of dollars. You know, if you want to spend $300 million, that's great, you can. But guess what? Every dollar over $150 million actually costs you $2 or $3. So it makes teams really consider how to spend their money.
All I know is when I opened up this can of worms, I wasn't anticipating that. I thought, okay, well, we're about to wrap up the show. We're going to tell everyone to hit that subscribe. And I made a mistake. I opened up Pandora's box, and you can't just
pour it over my head. I'm on fire.
Yeah, well, Dave, I think Drew's going to like my prediction here, because I'm actually, I've given it some thought here. I think this is as much of a coin flip. I'm talking obviously Panthers Lightning here, because we're talking about Kucherov. I'm going Panthers. I'm going to take the Panthers in 6. And I realized, they're the defending Stanley Cup champions. One of the main reasons why I'm going with the Panthers, because the Panthers obviously are very deep as well. They're going to miss Aaron Ekblad, obviously, right, guys? Mm-hmm. That's something that, I don't think anybody saw coming. He's not going to be available for the playoffs. At least I haven't read anything he's done. So I don't know if I'm taking the Panthers to go all the way to the Stanley Cup final, but Victor Hedman has not looked like the same Victor Hedman. Like last year, Hedman, that was Duncan Keith-esque, right? That was Drew Doughty-esque 2012, 2014. Hedman was by far, the best player in the playoffs. I'm not talking about forward or defense. I'm talking about any player. Hedman was the best player, in my opinion, for my money, and I don't have a lot of it. But I'm taking the Panthers here in 6 games. I think they've been a great story, and I think if you want to call it an upset, I think they're going to upset the Lightning.
Hedman's been playing injured. You can see that he's hurt, and as a result, I think given all that, you take Hedman out of Tampa Bay, you take Ekblad out of Florida, it's almost like a wash in terms of stud defensemen. Right now, the Panthers have been playing better hockey than the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I hope. And Joel Quenneville, you can't emphasize enough how good Joel Quenneville is behind the bench for the Florida Panthers and how important he is. And so I would agree with you. And I hope, as my rant before demonstrated, I hope the Panthers win, because I can't stand this nonsense that the Lightning have legally been allowed to engage in this year. That's not on their fault. That's on Gary Bettman and the front and the NHL rules enforcement committee, which might as well just be a big joke. Player safety is a joke, and the salary cap and the enforcement thereof is also a joke. Mr. Manuk, final word to you. Let's wrap this show up and get outside. It's a bright, beautiful, sunny Saturday morning.
Tampa. Thank you.
And on that note, we remind everybody that coming up Wednesday night, the Illegal Curve post-game show after the Jets and the Oilers.
Tuesday. Don't forget about Tuesday.
You haven't, I was going to mention Tuesday. Dave, at some point in time, might share some details about what's happening on Tuesday. He might not, so stay tuned for that if you're able to watch it. David will be on illegalcurve.com and on our Twitter feed at Illegal Curve as well. Want to give a shout out to our sponsors, our good friends at Boston Pizza. They have the perfect starting lineup tonight with the BP Game Day Meal Deal. Choose 2 of your favorite medium gourmet pizzas, an order of Boston's famous wings, or a triple order of Boston's famous wings, 2 dipping sauces, all for $54.99, available for takeout and delivery only at bostonpizza.com, or download the MyBP app. Always want to give a shout out to Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club. Remember, hashtag ICOTPool. Stay tuned to our Twitter feed for when that will get launched anytime a playoff game goes into overtime. Linden Market Dental Center, our good friend Dr. Les Reich is there. Bernstein's Deli, home of the Illegal Curve Sandwich. Zappia Group Realty, our buddies Frank and Mauro Zappia. And Seagram's, of course. Seagram's, our newest sponsor. So Fireball for all at 11:40 in the morning, because you can't go wrong with that. Want to thank everybody who joined us in the chat today. It was certainly a lively group. So great to see so many of you. Again, we'll be back Tuesdays and Wednesday. Tuesday details to come. Wednesday post-game show when the final buzzer sounds. Anybody else I have to give a shout out to? I think that's pretty much it. I think I've covered it all. Want to say thank you to Dave Manuk. Thank you to Ezra Ginsburg. You guys did a great job today. Frank Saravelli, Jeff Hamilton, they were our guests on this morning's show. We thank everybody. We remind you that if it's Saturday, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms.